Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto gained the power of control over shadows. Forbidden Scroll Incident forgoes darker power part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. In the vast multiverse that is the work of Naruto, there are a great many changes, both great and small, that alter the story of the young titular Jinchuriki. From stories of great mistreatment to alternate realities of godlike powers granted to the young blonde. However, there is no greater point of change than the fabled Scroll of Seals event. No greater amount of changes has been seen through any other event. Gaining the powers of the gamer, receiving lost family, new friends or even lovers, obtaining greater strength from alternate heroes. This one event has and always will have the greatest impact on one Uzumaki Naruto, both in true canon and a great many fanins in this world. However, it must be established that this story has changed in the timeline, even before the major event of the Scroll of Seals. In a case of wrong place, wrong time, our young hero stumbled upon the biggest travesty of Konohagakure. The aptly named Uchiha massacre, the cold-hearted slaughter done by a single shinobi of their own family, was the blackest mark in Konoha's history since the betrayal of Madara Uchiha himself. As the story goes, the lone Uchiha Itachi murdered almost every man, woman, and child of the Uchiha clan in a single night. The lone survivor was his younger brother, Sasuke. Yet the boy didn't remain unscathed, for in his pursuit of power, Itachi used a dark technique on Sasuke. Severe trauma caused by the technique would forever change young Sasuke into an avenger with a dark desire for revenge. The story reported of this massacre is quite different from the truth of the matter, but then again, what kind of story could this be if it were true? Nonetheless, this isn't a story of a brooding avenger, a black-haired youth who would sacrifice everything to get his revenge. No, this is about a cheerful blonde who achieves the impossible and unfortunately decided to prank said avenger for an earlier humiliation in the academy. The 7-year-old Naruto had climbed the imposing wall around the Uchiha district, the darkening hours providing shadows for the shinobi in training to put to good use. I'll get that team for earlier. How dare he humiliate me in front of Sakura-chan. His ears still burned in anger and embarrassment. Earlier that day, outside the academy, it was the same as any other day really, homeroom, history, weapon practice and finally sparring before the lunch break and jutsu studies to finish the day. It was during this sparring that Naruto received his great embarrassment. "Hi. Sasuke-kun is so cool," was the collective swooning call of several young girls gazing admiringly at an equally young black-haired boy. Among them was a pink-haired girl with hearts in her eyes sighing as she gazed at the man of her dreams. "He looks so cool. Sasuke-kun is the best," she thought excitedly as she and numerous other girls observed the rather one-sided fight. A dark smug look adjourned the young man, wearing simple white shorts and a dark shirt with his clan's fan-like red and white symbol on the back. He had handily defeated his opponent with little difficulty, though the achievement wasn't as great as his fangirls proclaimed. After all, his opponent was the wild and inept Uzumaki Naruto. Ahaha, never stood a chance, dope. Like you could ever beat Sasuke-kun. Just give up. Right on his face. Damn, does he even train? Laying on his face, Naruto's ears burned as he heard the jeers of Sasuke's fans and his fellow classmates. Pushing himself up, he spat out a bloody dirt clod onto the ground, that last sucker punch from the stuck-up Uchiha having split his lip. He futilely tried to brush the dirt from his white shirt and green shorts. Tonight was definitely going to be laundry night now. "Sasuke is leading 2-0, are you able to continue, Naruto?" The question came from a dark-skinned brunette of a man, Naruto's primary teacher Yumi no Iruka. The scar-faced man looked at the young blonde in concern. It was a solid punch that had knocked the boy down. Stumbling slightly, the blonde gave his sensei a thumbs up. "I'm good, sensei. Just watch, I'll smack him down next," he proclaimed loudly. Though hesitant at the boy's unsteady form, he lifted his hand anyways. If Naruto wanted to fight anyway, he wouldn't stop it without good reason. Begin. Jumping backward, he observed the two in the small sparring ring. Standing 10 feet apart from each other, the two boys stared the other down. Snorting derisively, Sasuke decided this farce of a fight was getting way too dull to continue, even though Naruto's proclamation was slightly amusing. "As if the dope could even lay a single finger on me." With that thought fueling him, he dashed forward, readying a fist to knock his opponent out completely. Naruto readied himself to meet Sasuke's charge, his hands held unsteadily in front of him. Smirking at the uselessness of his opponent's attempts to prepare, he suddenly stopped short of the Uzumaki, deftly avoiding the poorly telegraphed preemptive attack sent his way. Sidestepping the punch, he threw his right fist out into a haymaker. Naruto ducked in desperation, feeling the side of Sasuke's fist slide against his hair. "I did it," he thought elatedly, only to see stars as a sudden knee to the forehead knocked him back. Sasuke smirked as the boy stumbled back holding his face. "Give it up, dope, you don't stand a chance," he taunted. "DRRR, I'll show you, team." Despite the pain and dizziness from the blow, Naruto charged forward with bloody intent. He was getting a blow in if it killed him. Quickly getting into Sasuke's personal space, he threw a flurry of body shots towards him. Dodging each blow with minimal movement, Sasuke waited for the right moment to strike. Seeing the growing frustration on Naruto's face, he didn't have to wait long as the rage-fueled blonde overextended a kick. Naruto's eyes widened as he felt a powerful blow to his back, Sasuke having slipped past his straight kick and gotten behind him. The boy stumbled forward, gasping in pain as he struggled to stay up. Points were only awarded on knockdowns and ring-outs, and as long as he stayed up, he was still in this. Still facing away from Sasuke, he decided to do something unorthodox, time for an Uzumaki special. Falling onto his hand suddenly, he threw a donkey kick at the Uchiha. Stunned at the sudden movement, Sasuke received a full sandal to the jaw and was thrown back straight onto his ass. Point Naruto. The score is 2-1 now. Iruka called out to the stunned class. Turning his stumble into a surprise attack, sometimes the blonde surprised him with his unpredictability. The rest of the class wasn't so happy about that, particularly the fangirls were quite upset. Stupid Naruto. How dare you put your dirty feet on Sasuke-kun. A certain pink-haired kunoichi in training cried out, shaking her fists angrily at the blonde. Flinching at the young girl's rage, Naruto took a step back in fear. How are we supposed to spar if I can't hit him? Why are you so angry? I was cool there, Sakura-chan. He thought in frustration. Why does Sasuke get all the attention? People celebrated when anyone else got a hit in, not just Sasuke. But when he gets a shot and everyone berates him. Where's the fairness in that? He'd show them 2 more points and he would win. With renewed confidence in himself, he stood across from a seething Sasuke, who sported a growing bruise on his chin and dirt smeared onto his cheek. You won't be getting lucky again, dope, I'm ending this now. He growled out, barely holding himself from charging to wait for Iruka's signal. Wah wah wah. Keep crying, team. I can still win. Pulling his eyelid down, he taunted the Uchiha, reveling in the sheer rage he could see in the youth's face. Begin. Once more Iruka gave the signal, readying himself to intervene in case it got too heated. The look on Sasuke's face was not giving him a good feeling. Without further talking, the two boys dashed towards each other, each prepared to beat the other into the dirt. Naruto began by ducking down and throwing a quick uppercut to the Uchiha's already bruised chin. Leaning his head out of the way, Sasuke avoided the blow and threw out a snap kick at the boy's shin. Flinching at the strong blow to his leg, Naruto limped away from Sasuke's follow-up hammer punch to his head. Spinning on his good leg, he threw a fierce backhand at Sasuke. Ducking below it, Sasuke threw his leg out in a sweeping kick, knocking the surprised blonde off his feet and leaving him flipping in midair. Quickly taking advantage of his opponent's vulnerability, Sasuke slammed his fists in a double-handed downward smash to send Naruto straight into the ground. Letting out a silent cry of pain, Naruto laid on the ground, the wind knocked out of him from Sasuke's painful combo. He shifted to his back as Iruka called the match and quickly came to check on his student. Winner Sasuke. Deep breathes Naruto, it'll pass. He knelt next to the shell-shocked Naruto, watching as his student struggled to regain his breath. After a few moments, he helped Naruto to the sidelines to open the area for the next set of matches. Naruto looked towards the crowd despondently as Sasuke walked back towards their classmates, quickly getting surrounded by his fangirls. Sasuke-kun is so amazing. I knew he'd win. Naruto Baka had to pull a dirty trick just to land a hit. Dear Sasuke-kun, you can use my handkerchief to clean your face. One of his fangirls excitedly offered the cloth to him. Keeping his calm facade up, Sasuke politely declined the offer and reached into his pocket to grab his own. Cleaning himself up, he glanced towards the defeated Uzumaki some distance away. The two met in a glaring contest for a few moments before Sasuke smirked haughtily and turned away, moving to stand towards the edge of the group. Glaring at the smugness of the Uchiha, Naruto could only shake in silent impotent rage at his situation. He watched as Sakura and others happily followed Sasuke like love-struck puppies, cooing praises at him along the way. His pride stinging in his defeat, he immediately began plotting his revenge upon the obnoxious boy. He was getting such a pranking tonight. He had more than a few ideas going through his mind at this point. Glitter bomb, maybe glue and feather bomb with a stink bomb attached, how about all of the above? He's showing up looking like a glittery chicken tomorrow. His revenge-filled thoughts comforted him as he sat off to the side, no longer paying attention to the matches. The Uchiha compound, that night. Shaking himself from his sour memories, Naruto prowled around the darkened alleys, making his way towards Sasuke's house. Looking around, he readjusted his bag of tricks on his shoulder, wondering where any of the stuck-up clan usual members were. Even in these darker hours, they would usually be out and about, the compound being a mini-village in its own right. Shrugging dismissively, he moved on, missing the dark splotches to his left in the shadows of a doorway to a bakery. It was time to get to work. Sasuke wouldn't know what hit him. A few minutes later, just a few hundred feet away from his target, Naruto suddenly stopped, a cold feeling freezing him in place. Unexplained fear and paranoia ran through his body as he frantically looked around himself. What's going on? Where is that feeling coming from? He looked around, his shaking form leaning against the gate to the house. Feeling odd wetness under his feet, he looked down to see he had stepped into a murky puddle. Looking towards its origins, he saw a trail go towards the darkness of the house's entrance. He could faintly see a lumpy mass at the base, but couldn't really see it clearly. The lost little lamb has wandered into the slaughter. Suddenly an ominous voice sounded out above him. Stumbling away from the voice, Naruto looked up at a shadowy figure on the roof, seeing nothing more of their form than a dark cloak and single glowing red eye behind a tiger-stripped mask. "WW, who are you?" the child questioned shakily. The figure chuckled darkly, not deigning to answer the boy as he suddenly vanished. The boy's terror brought on a moment of extreme luck as Naruto fell to the ground and barely avoiding a blow he never saw. A crack was heard as the boy turned and saw the masked man with his fist buried in the wall, right where his head had been. "Is he trying to kill me?" he thought in fear as he attempted to crawl away, bloodying himself in the forgotten puddle in his attempt to escape. He ended up bumping into the very man he was crawling away from, his sudden appearance causing the boy to let out a frightened yelp as he quickly began to crawl backward. Pulling a small blade from his cloak, he bared it threateningly at the terrified child. Naruto immediately put his hands up in an attempt to defend himself from the cloaked man. "Maybe I should take a limb off, make it easier to get the boy later." The man thought idly, enjoying seeing the terrified spawn of the man he hated squirm in fear. Tilting his head to the side, he paused as a presence made itself known. "It's time to leave, Anbu will be here soon." A quiet voice called out behind him. Looking at his soon-to-be protege, the masked man paused in contemplation before turning back to the child. Naruto could only look on in confusion and fear as a second man appeared, not recognizing the young man in grey Anbu armor, but realizing he wasn't here to save him. He watched the masked man seem to contemplate something for a moment before turning back to him. "Very well." With that, he readied the blade, taking his time to creep closer to the boy. With wide eyes, Naruto threw his hands out in a futile attempt to stop or dodge the blade, only for the man's arm to pass through his guard. He screamed in pain as the blade tore into his face. He quickly grabbed at his wound, rolling on the ground in a pain-filled fervor. "A parting gift, child, don't worry, I will come back to visit in time." With that foreboding statement going unheard by the crying child, he soon vanished. The second man frowned at the pitiful sight before him, his pacifist nature disturbed by the pain before him. Sensing the masked man no longer in the area, he quickly threw a small senbon at the boy's neck. Blissfully knocked unconscious from the needle, Naruto finally stilled. Jumping down from the wall, he approached the boy and knelt beside him. Adjusting the boy's memories with a jutsu, he then sighed faintly as he turned to jump away, quietly praying to Kami to watch over this unfortunate child in the future. Awakening a few days later to a morose Hokage waiting for him, he learned of what he had stumbled upon that night. The entire Uchiha clan had been murdered. Despite his best attempts, he couldn't tell the Hokage much of what he saw, having no clear memories of the night in question. All he could remember was a dark figure and intense pain, everything else was just a blurry mess of fear and helplessness. A few more minutes of attempted conversation with the boy and the third Hokage left him to rest, understanding that Naruto needs to come to terms with his new reality. Naruto lightly brushed his hand against the bandages on the right side of his face, faintly remembering the Hokage explaining the damage done to him. His eye was too damaged to repair, there was nothing but an empty socket left behind now. Alone in his thoughts, Naruto blankly stared off into space, everything was different now. An entire clan was gone, his eye was gone, and he had a foreboding feeling that the man who did this to him would be back in time as well. His fists tightened on his covered legs, a brief flash of determination in his lone eye. "I won't be helpless next time, I need to get stronger." With this thought running through his mind, he leaned back to sleep. He had to work harder from now on, there were real monsters in this world to prepare for. Though the road to recovery was hard, the boy powered through it with greater ferocity and determination. With greater focus on his studies and even more effort on his physical efforts through the years, the young Uzumaki managed to pull his scores up enough to hit the middle of the class. Despite his effort though, without any true support from people who could train him properly, he couldn't attain the strength he desired. A few short years later, a young Naruto sits upon a swing outside his academy, his form the very definition of dejection. His solitary gaze resting on the ground in despondency at his situation. Though teary-eyed, he wouldn't allow them to fall. Crying helps no one after all. Why? Why is that stupid jutsu so damn difficult? Why can't I get it right? These thoughts and similar blazed through his mind as he quietly seethed in self-resentment at his failure. The third one in his tenure as an academy student, though this one was his only chance to stay with his age group. The test to graduate the academy was rather straightforward, a comprehensive written test over shinobi techniques, prudent formulas and history, along with a simple exam of the three most basic jutsu in a shinobi's arsenal. It was the feasibly simplest jutsu that brought his score down to failure. Unshin no Jutsu, a rank technique that creates an illusory copy of the user. It wasn't solid, it was rather useless unless one was particularly clever. But in the end, it was his downfall. Despite achieving a middling score in the written exam, the jutsu portion was the most important aspect of the exam. It was worth 2/3 of the final grade. Why was that even a thing? Sighing to himself, he looked towards the gathered students and their families, celebrating the milestone the new graduates had achieved. I did it. I passed. Fantastic job. I'm making your favorite dinner tonight. I aced the test, it was so easy. I'm proud of you, son. Yet among these happy voices, darker whispers could be heard by the despondent blonde. Did you see him over there? He didn't pass this time either. A woman whispered irately to her neighbor, both looking distastefully at the young man. Good riddance, he should just give up. Why they allow that boy to even attend is beyond me. She responded, a sneer on her face. Blasted dem, white. Remember the law. Quickly interrupting her before she fully broke the third's law, they quickly walked away with their children in tow. The law again, what the hell are they talking about? The boy thought to himself, watching as the crowd soon dispersed as the happy families left to celebrate. Frowning to himself, he ready to leave his spot. Time spent wallowing in self-pity was better spent at home. However, upon standing he heard someone land next to him. Looking to his side he saw his sensei, Mizuki, standing there with a somewhat genial smile on his face. No luck in passing this time, huh? Mizuki began, a look of sympathy on his face for the blonde. No was the despondent reply, but I'm not giving up. I'll pass for sure next time, sensei. Just watch. He quickly recovered, brashly proclaiming his desires to his teacher. Mizuki let a smirk light his face. Well, I think I might have an idea for you to pass this time if you're interested. The two quickly left the academy's property, Mizuki detailing the special secret exam he could take to finally pass. Naruto had quickly run home after hearing Mizuki-sensei's extra credit exam for him. It didn't sound that hard really. Sneak into the tower, head to the specified records room and sneak out with a big special scroll. After that, head to a safe place in the western woods, learn a technique from the scroll, and wait to show his results to sensei after nightfall. All in all, a straightforward exam right up the Uzumaki's alley. Simple and easy to remember, just how he liked it. Dressing for the occasion in a black long-sleeved shirt, black cloth pants, and a black bandana to hide his nearly fluorescent blonde hair, and he was set on that front. He had a small bag with important essentials, rope with a grappling hook, lockpicks, glass cutters, plus a few other small tools he could potentially need. Brushing his hand against the dark cloth eye patch he was using tonight, he locked his apartment and ran off in the direction of the Hokage's tower. The guard's shift change was happening soon, and from past pranking experience he knew this would be the best time to strike. Arriving at the tower a few short minutes later, Naruto hid in the shadows of a water tower as the skies turned red around him. His gaze was drawn to a few pairs of shinobi walking out the entrance, the day guards no doubt. They passed by a few fresh-faced replacements, stopping a moment to chat. Taking this opportunity, the boy quickly jumped to the next building adjacent to the tower. Unfortunately, he couldn't really jump onto the tower from his position, but he could assuredly climb up the side with his supplies. Glancing around to double-check any possible onlookers, he quickly dropped down and ran to the brush-covered side of the tower upon seeing none. Readying his grappling hook, he aimed for a third-story balcony that was on the backside of the tower. A resting break area the employees or visiting clients could enjoy when desired if he remembered right. It was also right below the room he needed to break into, which was a bonus in his book. Throwing the hook, he watched as it sailed true and just went over the side. Pulling the rope a few times to ensure a solid hold, he quickly began climbing when satisfied with it. A few moments later the young shinobi was rapidly pulling the dangling rope up and out of sight. Below, a pair of guards rounded the corner just as the rope vanished from their line of sight. Letting out a breath he didn't know he was holding, Naruto quickly moved to the doorway. To his surprise he found the door propped open with a small stone, likely a guard somewhere needed a smoke break too often to need permission. Hiding the bulkier and now unneeded tools behind a potted plant, he grabbed his lockpicks and flashlight and moved inside. With the waning light from the setting sun, Naruto could see a darkened hallway greeting him. Looking both ways he strained his hearing, listening for any noises of the approaching guard variety. Unheard he proceeded to quickly and silently make his way farther down the hall, away from the front of the building and the more likely places the guards would be checking by now. Reaching the stairwell, he quietly opened the door just enough to squeeze in and slowly closed it behind him. With nary a sound, the boy made his way up the stairs to the next floor. Repeating his earlier actions, Naruto squeezed in through the doorway and looked around himself. A short hallway that went to several side doors and a small lobby at the other end where non-emergency clients would gather to wait and place their missions. All was dark and quiet on the floor, not a sound or light on in his sight. Nodding to himself he walked to the middlemost door of the hallway and double-checked it to the room number Mizuki had given him. Grinning at the match, he quickly checked to ensure the room was truly locked. Maybe my luck will hold out. He hoped silently, only to frown when the door held shut. Shoot, oh well, muttering to himself, he quickly pulled out his lockpicks, making surprisingly short work of the lock and its tumblers. Way too easy, he remarked quietly with a grin, putting his tools away as he slipped into the now unlocked room. Looking around the room, he saw a multitude of shelves holding a great many kinds of scrolls of various importance. A cursory search told him that the overly large scroll he was looking for wasn't directly out in the open, which meant he'd need to hunt it down in the more secure storage closets in the back of the room. There were 4 to choose from, each maybe the size of a typical walk-in closet in an average home. Picking the leftmost one, he quietly knelt down and picked the lock with minor difficulty. Looks like these locks are more sensitive, more tumblers too. The Uzumaki thought idly, patiently picking the lock and slowly opening the door. A click was heard as he turned the flashlight on to quickly check the small room. Frowning at the lack of his target, he moved on. So on and so forth, he moved on to the next door, repeating his actions and only causing his frown to grow more as he repeatedly failed to find his target. Growling irately as he finally got to the final door, he took longer in his annoyance as he picked the last lock. Of course, it's in the last one I pick, he growled out under his breath. Finally hearing the telltale click of the lock opening, he opened the door and immediately saw his goal. Sitting almost reverently at the back of the small storage room, a large 3-foot scroll sat there. Moving to it, Naruto quickly checked around the scroll, trying to strain his limited chakra sensing abilities to see if there were any special traps. Finding none, as far as he could tell, he lightly grabbed the overly large scroll. Seriously? This is a total academy student exam, there is no way anything actually important is this huge and poorly guarded. His brow slightly twitching in mild irritation at the so-called secret extra credit exam. Hefting the scroll onto his shoulder, he left the storage closet and quietly made his way back to the room's entrance. Cracking the door open slightly, he looked around the hallway. No doubt the guards were on the way to check this floor in their rounds. Faintly he could hear footsteps approaching from the same stairway he had entered from, but they seemed to be coming from above. Uh-oh, who the hell is coming down? He quietly panicked and ventured to look out the doorway, and seeing no one in the hallway yet, quickly dashed away to the other end. Slipping quickly into the stairwell by the lobby, he managed to close the door just as the opposite stairwell popped open. Letting out a quiet breath of relief, Naruto tried to steady his panicked breathing. Hearing his heartbeat loudly in his ears, he quickly made his way back towards his gear on the outside balcony. Hearing the quiet small talk of the guards farther down the stairwell, he grinned triumphantly as he made his way back onto the 3rd floor. Despite the time he had taken to pick all those locks, he had still beat the guards by at least a floor. Just how lax were these guards tonight? He also got to avoid whoever came from the top floor, probably a janitor or something like that. Getting to the balcony, he leaned against the wall under a large window, relaxing for a moment as he quickly tied a strap onto the ends of the large scroll and secured that to the small of his back. Grabbing his bag and his rope, he went over to the furthest edge of the balcony's rail, right where it met the side of the building. Deftly tying the rope in the special knot that the academy taught to allow retrieval, he quickly scampered down the rope with a madman's grin on his face. A quick tug and flick of the wrist untied the rope and allowed him to rapidly put it away. Taking a moment to look around, the Uzumaki was satisfied with his surroundings and quietly made his way across the small road across from the tower. Full of self-satisfaction in his near-flawless execution, the young shinobi in training quickly ran off into the darkening night. Unknown to him, a certain gray-haired Chunin watched as he ran off to the western forest. Grinning to himself, he went off to begin the next phase of his plans. Soon I will be long gone from this pathetic village, and you'll be dead, demon. With the scroll I will be greatly rewarded by Orochimaru-sama. With twisted thoughts of child murder and delusions of grandeur running through his dark mind, the Chunin vanished from his hiding place and went off to begin spreading the good news. Western forest, clearing. Cheerily setting the large scroll on the ground, Naruto quietly hummed a jaunty tune to himself as he unrolled the scroll. Gazing upon its contents to see just what kind of awesome techniques he could find. Let's see, 8-point seal. What use is that? Muttering to himself, he pushed the scroll out a few more feet, skipping over a decent chunk of the scroll to find anything actually worth it. Page Bunshin, screw that. I hate that damn technique. Snorting derisively, he moved past the Kenjutsu, screw that entire jutsu tree right in the ear. He skimmed past it, seeing other shadow-related techniques until he saw a word that caught his interest. Contract. Like the summoning contract that let the super powerful shinobi get even more powerful. This was a lot more interesting already. Shadow contract. Warning to those who attempt to sign this contract, unlike a summoning with somewhat generalized standards, the shadow contract requires greater unknown sacrifice. Brought in by the Nara clan at the inception of Konohagakure, we were warned to only try to use this in the direst of circumstances. Only attempt when you are truly willing to make the sacrifice requested by the contract summons, whatever it may be. The writing was aged but clean, most likely a note by the second or first Hokage when the contract was added to the scroll. Naruto scratched the side of his head beneath the eye patch as he contemplated the warning. This wasn't really a dire circumstance, but a contract with whatever a shadow could end up being was way better than any technique he could learn in the maybe 2 or 3 hours he had remaining. Looking below the note he saw a newer slightly scratchy handwritten note at the bottom edge. After talking to a few of the older Nara clan members, there may be a correlation in the contract and the universal laziness, with utter lack of motivation, that the clan experiences in all but the direst of situations. Old tall tales that had been passed down for generations spoke of a deal made with a shadowy figure. Deal with some kind of demon. Improbable, but may require future research when time is available. All this went over the 12-year-old's head, not really wanting to think too much more on it. The choice. Contracts were a sign of power in this conflict-filled world. Even the lowest tier of contracts could prove to be a great boon in the right circumstances. But that assurance in mind, he looked towards the large strange seal in the center of the section of the scroll, the word shadow contract outlining it on either side. A small bit of chakra later and the telltale poof of smoke deposited the scroll into his waiting hands. This is gonna be awesome. Naruto was almost vibrating in excitement as he spun around and untied the much smaller scroll. Maybe a little over a foot long and 2 inches wide, he unfurled the scroll until he spotted the writing. Unbeknownst to the distracted preteen, the shadows around him suddenly grew darker and somehow seemed to gain ominous movement. Paying no heed to his surrounding, the boy looked over the faded signatures he could make out. So, a contract uses blood and chakra to make a pact and summon a summon. How do I do this? Fingerprints and signature, it looks like I don't have any ink, is that blood? Looking closer at the scroll he could see the rusty coloring of the ink, making him believe he was accurate in his assessment. Reaching into his bag he grabbed a kunai and set the scroll down, double-checking the previous applicants again. Alright, the left hand should be fine. Do I need hand signs? Pricking his finger with a slight flinch, a droplet of blood fell onto the blank space of the scroll. The wind picked up ominously around the clearing as the young academy student looked around in surprise. Rising to his feet he spun quickly, rapidly looking every which way trying to figure out what was happening. New one. Perhaps, requires approval. Incoming. All around the boy whispers could be heard, no particular direction telling him where the voices were coming from. The shadows around him continued to darken his surrounding until he was in pitch blackness. A shadowy mist was all around him with only a few short feet allowing him to see. What the hell is going on? He cried out to the voices, brandishing his kunai as a meager form of defense from whatever was happening. He continued to spin around, trying to find an escape, but unwilling to try to leave the faintly lit circle he was trapped in. Around him the shadows slowly crept towards a single point, just past the contract scroll on the ground. Relax child, you are in no danger from us. A stronger, louder voice spoke from the massive shadows gathered behind him, causing the boy to jump in place. GAHH. With a yelp of surprise, Naruto spun back to face the shadowy mass. He watched in trepidation as the mass compressed towards a singular point, forming a vaguely human figure in front of him. Somehow both solid and gaseous, a tall shadowy man was standing in front of him, bright blue energy, appearing where a human's eyes would be. Who are you? Naruto asked shakily, quiet chuckles and glowing eyes narrowed in amusement was his response. The Shadow King, young human, do you not know what you have done? You desired power, correct? A contract with the shadows. The question bounced around the frightened boy's head for a moment before he gained a sudden burst of determination. I can't be scared here. I'm not getting hurt, there's nothing to be afraid of. I wanted this. Thinking himself back to his typical confidence he stopped his cowering. Right, you're right. I want to form a contract with your clan. What do I need to do to earn your allegiance? With his confidence renewed he spoke to the Shadow's leader. Earn, how refreshing, you humans always demanded yet never asking. To earn the power of shadows you must make a great sacrifice. What are you willing to sacrifice for power? That question gave Naruto pause, just what would he sacrifice? What could he sacrifice to gain the strength of these shadows? He couldn't really come up with anything, he didn't have much in the manner of material possessions. Or even immaterial possessions for that matter. I don't know, I don't really have anything to give you. He finally admitted after a few minutes of contemplation. We do not ask for material items as sacrifice, your soul, an emotion, even parts of your very body, those are the last few sacrifices that were accepted. Naruto's eyes widened at that revelation, his soul. Who would sacrifice that for power? Just how crazy were people? Unappealing sacrifices, understandable, perhaps I can offer a solution. Really? Sure, I guess I can hear you out. The shadowy figure nodded before lifting a smoky hand in the boy's direction. Allow me a moment to read your aura, there may yet be a deal to be made. Nodding with a hint of hesitance, the Uzumaki gulped down his nervousness and allowed the shadowy man to continue. A chill went down his spine as the semi-gaseous hand rested on the crown of his head. Interesting, so young but to have already experienced such pain. The Shadow King's eyes seemed to widen for a moment as he detected something particular in the boy's aura. I see there has already been a great sacrifice. What? What do you mean? His question remained unanswered as the shadowy being thought in quiet contemplation. Soon he began to squirm in place as the time began to stretch on to uncomfortable lengths. I believe a contract can be made, young one. Or really, what do I have to do? The excitement in his voice was nearly palpable. Grant the shadows home in your body, your missing eye shall be the source. Sacrifice your solitary existence to always be surrounded by me and my kin, that shall be your contract for power. That doesn't seem like a sacrifice to me, the boy commented quietly. Sacrifice the thing that caused the most turmoil in his life. Looking around, he could faintly see vague figures surrounding them, shadows of different sizes and shapes observing them both. Only humans would believe a sacrifice must be negative, so long as I deem it appropriate to the power desired. That is all that matters. Do you accept? Reaching out a hand towards the boy, the Shadow King offered it to seal the deal. Naruto only thought about it for a few moments, deciding quickly that it was definitely a sacrifice he wasn't afraid to make. Taking the shadowy hand, he shook it with full confidence. I accept. You won't regret this, not a bit, Tebeo. The Jinchuriki proclaimed in cheerful confidence. The Shadow King's eyes glowed brightly suddenly as the darkness surrounding them quickly became a tornado of darkness. It pulled Naruto into it, suffusing his form in a layer of darkness as he threw his head back in a silent scream. The tornado rose from his body with the tip focused upon his head, specifically the right empty socket hidden beneath his cloth eye patch. Almost as fast as it began, it was over, Naruto breathing heavily on his knees as smoky darkness seeped out from his right eye. A faint blue glow could be seen from beneath the cloth, matching the color of the Shadow King's own eyes. Welcome to the clan, young shade, rise and remove the cloth. Could have warned me, you know, Naruto grouched quietly to himself, shakily rising to his feet. The pain was most definitely not expected, nor was the lack of warning appreciated. Reaching up, he slowly removed the cloth, his eye widening at the now complete vision he now had. Yet there was more to it, covering his real eye, he focused solely on his new shadowy addition. The dark clearing around them was easily visible, almost as if it were a well-lit night instead of the moonless darkness it truly was. Whoa, this is cool. He remarked in awe as he looked around them. There is much potential in that eye, though it is not the full extent of the power I grant. Your will and desires with the proper sacrifice of chakra will allow control over shadows, the only limit will be what you can imagine. How do I do that? Actually, what does that even mean? He questioned, looking at the Shadow King. He let out a gasp as the shadowy figure had gained immense clarity in his new eye. No longer a vaguely human shape, he could now see a powerful-looking man in pitch-black armor. Full-plate armor with sharp edges and slim build, and a long feathered helm covered a largely featureless human-like face with sharp glowing blue eye. The king looked unlike any warrior Naruto had ever seen in any pictures before. That is for you to learn, young shade. But that said, the king held his hand out in a closed fist, an eerie glow coming from between his clenched fingers. After a few moments, he opened his hand and revealed a small black stone the size of his palm covered in faintly glowing purple seals. Tossing it to the slack-jawed Uzumaki, whom barely had the state of mind to catch it before it hit the ground. Boy. What the hell do you mean? How am I supposed to figure this out by myself? What the hell is this? Where the hell are you going? His questions fell on deaf ears as the king merely raised a hand in farewell, walking into the shadow of a tree and vanishing from sight. Create a technique useful in battle, and the answers will come. Good luck, young shade. The future will be quite eventful very soon. With those parting words, the Uzumaki was left alone in the darkness of the clearing. Shaking his fist in anger at the departed king, he looked over the stone in his hands. Seriously? Do all contracts come with such vague instructions? Whatever, I don't need him. I'll figure this out in no time. Not a problem, Dadabeo. With renewed vigor, the young boy immediately got to work trying to manipulate the shadows around him. On Hagakure, same time, as the young Uzumaki was creating his contract with the Shadow King, he had unknowingly created a great commotion in the village itself. All over the village, shinobi ranked Chunin and above were jumping all around in desperate search for the missing blonde. Just over an hour ago the word had been spread, Uzumaki Naruto had stolen the forbidden scroll of seals. How the boy had even known about the scroll wasn't known, but he had to be found before the scroll was taken from him. The potential situations that this could end in were so vast that no one even cared to think about it, the main focus to find the boy and the scroll. In the commotion, a solitary Chunin broke off from traditional search patterns, heading towards the western forest at a quick speed. Mizuki had achieved his goals tonight, all that was left was getting the scroll and perhaps ending the demon once and for all. However, before he could get too far, a voice called out to him from behind. Mizuki? Where are you going? We still have another 5 blocks before we head west. Hiding his flinch at being caught running off, Mizuki turned around to see his fellow teacher Iruka landing next to him. Right, I don't know what I was thinking. "I'm just worried about Uzumaki, you know," he said through a strained smile, trying to hide his displeasure at the situation. "I understand, but we have to be thorough in our search." Iruka nodded in understanding, a look of concern on his face. "We never know if he could be in the one place we skipped over. Come on, the sooner we get this done the sooner we can head out west." But that he patted Mizuki on the shoulder, lightly pulling the man along as he led them back towards their assigned search areas. "Damn it. Just a few more seconds and I would have been in the clear. I need to find an opening to get away before someone else gets to the demon." Mizuki seethed as he followed alongside Iruka, impatiently trying to find a good place to get away from the diligent Chunin. Elsewhere in the Hokage's tower, an old man in red and white robes sat at his desk with a crystal ball in front of him. His reflection shone back at him from the crystal ball, nothing laid within its crystalline structure. He had activated the special remote viewing technique with the ball, and yet there was no sign of hide nor hair of the missing child. Sarutobi Hiruzen was working late this evening, the unfortunate result of the happy occasion of a nearly full graduating class from this season's batch of genin hopefuls. An unexpected error from the academy had doubled the amount of work he had to sort through, leaving him to stay at work late and unable to check in on the currently missing child before the situation had even occurred. Though it was thanks to this event that he had been practically the first to learn of the scroll's vanishing act. A hidden seal had activated upon its removal from its storage pedestal. Though he had been slow to awaken from his impromptu nap by the nagging feeling the seal caused, he had quickly made his way to the floor below. It seemed that in his haste he had inadvertently revealed his incoming towards the scroll's thief. By the time he had arrived at the room, the thief was nowhere in sight. The timely arrival from a teacher of the academy put him onto the young boy's trail. Mizuki had arrived not 30 minutes later, claiming to have spotted the boy with a large scroll on his back running through the village while out and about. He thought it more prudent to ensure nothing was amiss by checking with his superior before apprehending the child. The lone failure in the class, the normally cheerful boy, would no doubt be upset at his failure. Hiruzen had hoped to find him and perhaps treat him to a few bowls of ramen and a morale-boosting speech. Maybe he could look over the boy's scores, give a few pointers in the right direction. All that was on the back burner though, in light of Naruto's theft of the Forbidden Scroll, the situation was now very dire. Already he had heard a few mutterings of treason and the only punishment fit for that crime. Though he had ordered him found and brought to him unharmed, he couldn't control his force's every move. There were plenty of people in the village who saw the boy, not as the hero he was, but the demon he contained. It was a regret he would carry to the next world, how his misguided attempt at honoring the desires of his late successor for Naruto to be viewed as a hero had instead caused the boy no small amount of pain and adversity. It was then a stray thought took hold in the professor's mind. I should find Iruka or Mizuki, something about the situation is bothering me. Reactivating his remote viewing technique he gazed into the crystal with renewed focus, watching as Mizuki jumped through the trees with a dark look on his face. Western Forest, clearing. Young Naruto was working diligently on his newly acquired abilities, oblivious of the great trouble he had caused in his exam. He had been hard at work for the last few hours, slowly getting a grip on his new powers. His eye glowed brightly in the darkness of the night as he threw his hand out, a few spikes made of shadows bursting from the darkened ground in front of him. Yes. 3 for 3. Finally. He cheered, doing a little victory dance around the clearing. Impressive, passed. He smiled as he tried to decipher the various faint whispers he could hear in the nearby woods. He had gotten used to the disjointed comments from the shadows on his endeavors, having long moved on from being creeped out by the eerie voices whispering in his ear. Turning he gave the multitude of shadows a thumbs up, glad to get some positive reinforcement from somebody. Even if they were just disembodied voices only he could hear. That actually sounds a lot worse than I thought it would, he suddenly thought with a rain cloud overhead, feeling a little depressed for a moment. Slapping himself on both cheeks with his hands he decided to push forward, why sweat the small stuff now? He had done something much crazier already and he wasn't giving it any extra thought. So, what do I call this technique? Inten. Kurosento, shadow style. Black spires. Maybe that's a little too on the nose, huh? I think I'll leave that for later. Let's see what the king meant about this stone. Shrugging his naming predicament away, he pulled the purple rune-covered stone from his pocket and looked it over some more. Undecipherable marking wrapped around the smooth flat black stone. He could faintly feel the same energy he had slowly been growing more proficient within it. It wasn't chakra per se, but some kind of semblance to it. Maybe it was an apt thing to say it was like a shadow of the energy that was chakra. To use his technique, he had to send chakra to his shadowy eye, where he would then get a burst of this shadow energy to suffuse his body. It was an interesting feeling the first few times, almost as if he had been dunked into ice water and suddenly pulled out to dry in a strong wind. There was an exhilarating amount of power he could feel just below the surface, but his control over it was just as fleeting as his control over his own chakra. It took grand movements along with very simple images to picture in his mind to manipulate the shadows in front of him. Though the darkened forest had no shortage of shadows for him to practice with, he still had to focus greatly to succeed. He could also feel the sentient shadows around him attempting to give him subtle nudges in the right direction, though he still couldn't hear much from them to be of any real use. Tossing the stone in the air and catching it, he contemplated his situation. More than likely he would gain better control of the shadow energy if he boosted his own chakra control. Not exactly his strong point, but he wasn't one to let that stop him. In addition to that, he was relatively certain that as he grew stronger in the shadow arts, he would be better able to hear the voices that whispered to him. Already he was able to hear them more clearly compared to only a few short hours ago. Catching the stone once more, he decided to try to fill it with shadow energy and see how it went. Focusing chakra to his eye, he felt it soon replaced with the sought-after power. Sending that to the stone yielded interesting results, the runes glowed brighter and the stone almost seemed to lighten as well. Adjusting his grip on the stone to better change the flow of energy, he felt it give suddenly. Surprised by the turn of events, he almost dropped the stone, only to increase the strength of his grip as he caught it. The stone then dissolved to dust, the glowing runes turning to a bright mist that circled around his head before flowing into the shadows that made up his eye. Whoa, that feels weird. What a head rush. Blinking rapidly at the feeling, he looked around wondering what exactly just happened. As the feeling faded, he suddenly saw flashes go past his shadow eye, images of something he could barely keep track of. It was a technique, a few actually, only he couldn't truly tell what they were. Was it some kind of graduation present? Shaking his head to clear the dizziness from the images, Naruto focused on his own shadow for once. Grabbing his nearby kunai, he dropped it into his shadow, a small ripple appearing as it slowly slid into the ground and vanished into the darkness. Swiping his hand around on the ground, he didn't feel a thing, it was stored safely in his shadow. Taking a few steps away, he reached into his shadow, his desire of receiving the blade, just as it was put in going through his mind. Letting out a yelp of pain as he jabbed his palm directly into the tip of the blade, he shook his hand rapidly and glared at his shadow. Stupid shadow. Why the hell would I want to grab at blade first? Give me the damn handle. He barked out, hesitantly put his unharmed hand into the pool of darkness slowly. Feeling the non-pointed end in his palm, he grabbed the blade and pulled it out. Better, he groused as he wiped the blood from his hand. Walking over to a tree, he decided to try it on the tree's shadow this time. Going through the process once more, he channeled his new energy into the tree's shadow and slowly pushed the blade into the tree. This was definitely going to be useful in the future. He soon ran around the clearing, pulling and deciding to show off a little. He grabbed few stones and juggled them animatedly, finishing with a flourish as they fell at his feet and vanished into his shadow in a smooth motion. Grinning, he held his hands out, palms together as he willed the stones to reappear in the shadows of his hands. All three popped out on demand, giving the Uzumaki a case of the giggles as he gleefully went about another victory dance in the clearing. Oh yeah? Who's the man? That's right, Uzumaki and Naruto. That's who. The future most powerful baddest shadow-wielding Hokage. His voice echoed around the clearing as he loudly proclaimed his awesomeness to the forest around him. Little brat, white, trouble incoming. Perking up at the whispers, Naruto looked around suddenly upon hearing a rustling in the forest around him. The nearby brush was moving, no chance it was a shinobi. Any of them would be tree-hopping in the forest, especially if they had heard his loud proclamations. What is it? Who's there? He called out, quickly reaching into his shadow and grabbing his kunai to use for defense. From the brush entered three full-grown wolves, each snarling quietly at the loud child in front of them. Having been attracted by his loud voice and movements, the three had arrived to see a potential meal in front of them. This young one wasn't big enough to feed the full pack, but these three would eat decently enough. Wolves were opportunity hunters as well after all. Great, I think I'd rather have Iruka-sensei show up. He regarded the wolves with trepidation. Though the academy had taught them hunting tactics and they had all killed animals before. Well, rabbits trapped in rope snares. Not exactly the hardest kill, but it still counted, right? Looking at the wolves, he figured this was a great chance to test out his technique. Just hold still, guys, this will be over soon, he called out softly as he gathered the proper energy and visualized what he wanted. The wolves growled threateningly and inched forward slowly. Only moments away from pouncing on the boy, he threw his hand forward. Inten. Kurosento. Crying out the technique's name, half a dozen spikes burst from the wolves' very own shadows and pierced all three straight through. Both Naruto and the wolves stood still for a moment before the shadows receded into the ground, each animal slowly slumping to the ground. Waiting for a minute, then two, Naruto finally allowed himself a victory fist pump. Oh, hell yeah. Inten. Kurosento, success. Keeping his celebration to a much quieter level, he slowly edged his way over to the corpses. As he neared, he noticed something odd. Each corpse had a faintly glowing black and blue smoky mist rising off of it. It was at this point the images flashed before his eye once more. Stumbling back in the sudden dizziness, he leaned against a nearby tree as he tried to sort what he learned this time. Looking towards the corpse once more, he could hear a single word repeating itself in his mind. Would it really happen? It really didn't seem likely, but he doubted the king would have lied to him with this information. Arise. Aiming his hand forward, he clenched it into a fist. Suddenly the shadows of the clearing rapidly covered the corpses. Black mist swirled around and prevented him from seeing anything as growling was heard throughout the clearing. 3 shadowy beasts suddenly burst free from the dark misty pools. Each wolf stood at attention before him, eyes glowing an ominous blue as a dark mist, and blue energy ran along their forms. Speaking of which, each wolf had nearly doubled in size, now coming up to his shoulder at the very least. His eyes widened at the implications of this technique. There was no reason to believe it wouldn't work on people. But shinobi. It clearly boosted the wolves to greater strength. If he could get a shinobi's shadow, he could have an even deadlier minion, then the shinobi could be alive. Wait, I can't get ahead of myself. I'd still have to actually kill a shinobi to get their shadow. I'm still a long way away from that, I still have to pass the exam first. Reaffirming himself of his priorities, the boy moved over to inspect his new minions. Each wolf had been turned into a shadow beast soldier, stronger than they had been alive. Upon closer inspection, he saw small blue circles just between their shoulder blades. Maybe the size of his palm, he could tell they marked something, but wasn't entirely sure what they symbolized. Nonetheless, he now had access to 3 powerful allies thanks to his gifted technique shadow extraction. This is way better than a stupid clone jutsu, he remarked with a grin as he lightly patted the shadow beast in front of him. They were a weird amalgamation of corporeal and incorporeal beings cloaked in shadows and blue mists. Yet its fur was surprisingly soft. Pretty badass if I say so myself, he watched as the 3 seemed to preen under his praise. Let's try some stuff out, can you guys hide in my shadow? Waving his hand out, he willed his shadow to elongate and spread beneath the 3 shadow beasts. All 3 quietly sunk down to vanish into his shadow, as if they had never been there in the first place. Cool, the boy thought in awe, only to see the leftover corpses of the wolves on the ground. What do I do with these? He questioned out loud. Yes. Blinking at the shadows whispering, he shrugged, alright, that could work. Kneeling down, he brought both his palms to the ground and willed the shadows to spread around and absorb the corpses. They quickly sunk into the shadows, never to be seen again. Delicious. Good boy. The shadows around him seemed to quiver in delight, vague shapes around him moving about in appreciation to his gift. Giving them a small grin, he nodded before he turned back to his shadow. Faintly he could feel his new pets in there, awaiting his commands. Deciding it was time to experiment a bit more with his newly acquired minions, Naruto dived back into training once more. Mizuki was angry. Iruka was so damn diligent in the search and protocols that he couldn't find a chance to slip away unnoticed. He was a few moments from taking a kunai to the man's eye just to be done with it. Not that he could actually do that in the middle of the damn village, the thought nonetheless was quite cathartic. Thankfully, now that they were done with the northern sections they were assigned, he could leave to the western forest to finally get to the demon. At this point, he was well over 3 hours behind schedule. Alright, I'm going on ahead, Iruka, he announced at last, only to look around and only to find himself alone on the roof. Where the hell did he shit? Believing the worst, Mizuki immediately dashed off, cursing himself the whole way. His impatience must have tipped the scarred Chunin off or something. Reaching into his pouch, he grabbed a scroll and unsealed 2 overly large shuriken to place on his back. Thinking again, he also grabbed a small green vial from his pouch as well. He was going to have to deal with the situation quickly before anyone else happened into this and ruined it even more. Imino Iruka was a good shinobi, he had a better than average mission record before he discovered his passion was teaching the future genin of the village. He had always been well respected by his comrades. He worked hard to help his students achieve their goals both in and out of the academy. Despite all his hard work and his tenure as a Chunin instructor over the past decade, he never let his skills go dull. But it didn't a high skill level to see Mizuki was hiding something. In fact, he wouldn't have thought too much of it if the man wasn't so tense and constantly looking to the west forest. He didn't want to think the worst of his coworker and friend, but with the way things were going, he didn't want to take any chances. With this reasoning, he managed to find a good moment and slip away from Mizuki while the man begrudgingly searched one of the parks. After 30 minutes of tree jumping, the teacher found the missing boy. Dressed in black, he was hard to recognize at first, but Iruka would never miss those telltale whisker marks on his cheeks. The boy was scuffed up and laying on the ground panting heavily, looking for the world like he was exhausted for some reason. Looking around the clearing, he could see more signs of heavy training, deep gouges in trees and the ground. Upturned dirt from hard impacts, even the shed in the background had some damage done to it. Has he been training this entire time? Jumping down, he landed in front of the boy's panting form. Wa-sensei, you found me already. Sitting up suddenly, Naruto jumped to his feet while pointing animatedly at his sensei. Not responding at first, Iruka's head grew to comical size and he threw a fist straight into the top of his student's head. You idiot. What do you think you're doing? Do you have any idea what kind of trouble you've caused? Letting out a cry of pain and holding his head, the boy crouched down while whimpering pitifully. Why, sensei? What do you mean? Standing up, he grabbed the large scroll behind him and did his best to strike a pose, despite his teary eyes. I totally passed the secret exam, right? I mean, I grabbed the big scroll like I was supposed to, but I didn't learn a jutsu from it. But I came up with my own jutsu though. That should be, like, bonus points or something, right? Animatedly waving his hands around, the boy's face a picture of sincerity and innocence. Iruka could only look at the boy in utter confusion. Just what the hell was he talking about? There was no secret exam, no extra credit for graduation. Either you made it or you failed. Before he could really lay into the boy for his curiosity, Iruka's eyes widened as he highly tuned ears picked up the telltale whistling of incoming projectiles. Not even giving himself a chance to dodge, he immediately threw a hand out to push the boy away. Only to be shocked immensely as his student suddenly tackled into him and knocking them both out of the line of fire. The dozen kunai and shuriken flew past them harmlessly as the two laid off to the side. Holy shit. You okay, sensei? Panting in fear, Naruto thanked the shadows profusely in his mind for the last second warning. Careful, danger. Naru, how did you know about Iruka? Could only gape at the boy's shocking reflexes. Naruto's reaction speed in battle was always impressive, but never that good. Wow, I'm a little impressed, boy. I was expecting to take Iruka out with that at least. Landing on a branch a short distance away was the twistedly grinning Mizuki, a large shuriken in his right hand. Mizuki? What the hell are you doing? Iruka called out upon standing back up, ensuring Naruto was safely behind him. Mizuki-sensei, the boy had no small amount of fear in his eye at the dark look on the man's face. Give me the scroll, Naruto. The gray-haired Chunin demanded suddenly. No. Naruto, you need to get it away from here. He can't get the scroll, it could do great damage to the village. Iruka pleaded with the boy. Rushing the traitorous shinobi, the two Chunin clashed kunai to kunai. Despite the situation, Mizuki grinned cruelly. Why lie to the boy, Iruka? It's just one lie after another to the poor boy, isn't it? Lies? What is he talking about? The boy took a step away in fear and confusion. What do you mean? What lies? He stuttered out. Eyes widening at what Mizuki was implicating, Iruka immediately threw a kick towards Mizuki's inner knee. As the gray-haired Chunin dodged to the side, Iruka's eyes widened. Didn't he have to? He couldn't finish the thought as a series of crashes behind him alerted him to incoming danger. From behind, one of Mizuki's oversized shuriken blazed towards him to slash him from his blind spot. Banditi, the instructor, could only roll forward in a desperate attempt to dodge. Despite his best try though, he still felt the blade bite deep into his back, forming a long gash from his left hip to right shoulder. Ah! The Chunin struggled to stand, only to fall to a knee from pain and a sudden numbness. Poison. Sensei. Naruto cried out, moving towards his fallen teacher, only to pause when Mizuki jumped in front of his prone form. Looking out the corner of his eye, he saw Mizuki stalk towards the boy. Naruto. Run. His voice failed him as he shook in place while trying to push himself up. Now that he's taken care of, let me fill you in on that little secret, demon. It's the least I could do to help you pass on into the next life. Mizuki paused 5 feet from the boy, pulling his other shuriken from his back in preparation. Despite himself, Naruto couldn't back away, the answer to one of his most burning questions being dangled in front of him. Even the impending threat of death wasn't enough to dissuade him. What is the secret? What is everyone keeping from me? He demanded, almost pleadingly towards the Chunin. The terrible secret, dear boy, 12 years in the making. Something the third outlawed everyone from talking about in front of anyone not present during that fateful night. It went without saying exactly what night he was referencing. 12 years ago it could only be one event. The night the Kyuubi attacked. What is it? Naruto shook in place, a deep growing anxiety eating him inside. The secret of what really happened that night. The demon fox wasn't killed, it was sealed into a baby. You're that baby, but it was foolish to think a child could contain it. It corrupted you, it took over your body. You're the Kyuubi no Kitsune. With a mad grin on his face, he slowly moved forward, spinning his shuriken spinning like a saw blade as he began his attack. You caused all that death and destruction. You killed Iruka's parents. That's the reason why everyone hates you, that's why Iruka hates you. His grin got even darker as he entered attack distance to the frozen child. It must hurt to finally realize the truth of you really are, but don't worry, it won't hurt for much longer. With that, the crazed Chunin swung his spinning blade at the boy, who remained frozen in place at the horrible news he had just learned. No. Despite himself, Iruka managed to twist enough to throw a kunai at the traitor. Weakened though Iruka was, Mizuki still had to jump back to avoid it, giving the boy a chance to stumble backward and fall on his ass. I'm the demon, it's all my fault, that's why they hate me, even Iruka. He looked towards Iruka in fear, only to see a pained look on the man's face. He was exerting himself greatly just to stay conscious, whatever poison Mizuki had used was clearly taking its toll on the poor man. Run Naruto, you have to get away. It was all he could to struggle those words out, falling onto his face immediately afterward. Sensei. The boy could only watch in fear as his teacher fell to the ground completely. Damn it Iruka, you are getting to be a thorn in my side. I think I'll take care of you now. With that the man stalked towards the prone Chunin. Lies wrong. Contain or not contained. Naruto could hear the shadows whispering to him, all saying the same thing. He's lying, but no, I don't have time for that. I need to help Sensei. Even if he hates me, he is still one of my precious people. With memories of Iruka's kindness flashing through his mind, times of ramen together, when he'd be lectured for a prank or any number of times when Iruka showed he cared. But these thoughts fueling him, Naruto blasted forward with righteous anger glowing in his eyes. Surprised by the sudden maneuver, Mizuki was sent flying a dozen feet thanks to a flying tackle from the boy. As he flipped back to his feet across from the boy, he could see him take a fierce stance with the forbidden scroll by his side. His lone eye narrowed in a barely concealed rage, with an ominous glow coming from his covered socket. Naruto the poisoned man croaked out in surprise. Don't even think about touching my sensei. Try that again and I'll kill you. The boy growled out fiercely, all around them the shadows shifted angrily to match the boy's temper. What do you think you're doing, demon? Why are you protecting someone who hates you? He snarled out. Naruto only glowered at the man, a look of pure rage upon his face as he focused his power. The shadows around them darkened greatly, several deep growls sounding out from around them. What is this? Mizuki questioned, looking at the menacing figures in the shadows. Is this what he learned from the scroll? Iruka could only watch in awe as the very darkness around them seemed to react to the boy's anger. Not deigning to answer the traitor, Naruto swiped his hand out to his side. Come out. At his command the growls turned to howls, the shadows around them darkening even more as three sets of glowing eyes appeared surrounding Mizuki. Letting out a gasp of fear, the man slashed out in a full circle with his shuriken. Each of the shadowy beasts fell apart to smoke around him, causing him to grin in victory. That's it, that's all you got, demon. Not even batting an eye, Naruto threw his hand out once more. This time he aimed at the Chunin, Inten. Kuro Sento. From the man's own shadow flew nearly a dozen spikes of darkness, the man barely dodging the fatal spikes to his body. He felt a few catch him in his legs despite his efforts. Once more the growls could be heard around him, the shadowy mist once more solidifying into the three shadow beasts. Their eyes glowed bright blue in anger for their master, each diving towards the man and biting deeply into his body. One on each forearm holding him down while the third bit into his shoulder, altogether dragging him to his knees from the pain and their combined weight. Mizuki's eyes could only widen in terror, but how? I destroyed these things. He could only watch in frozen horror as Naruto dashed forward to attack once more. But the shadow beasts holding his opponent down, Naruto took great advantage and drew his leg back to send the mother of all kicks directly between the man's legs. Letting out a weak almost silent squeak, Mizuki was wholly unprepared for the next series of brutal attacks from the enraged blonde. Hokage Tower. Hiruzen could only stare in surprise as the academy student pummeled the captured Chunin like a punching bag for nearly 10 minutes before ceasing. Mizuki laid on the ground a bloodied heap, possibly crippled and definitely unconscious. Despite the severity of the situation, he let out a small smile when he saw the boy run to his sensei's side in concern. That boy never ceases to surprise me, to think he is capable of even using that standing. He quickly vacated his office to inform the gathered shinobi outside of the resolved situation and to ensure he had some medics on hand to go retrieve the injured. Tilting his hat forward to hide his face, his smile turned into a grin. Naruto-kun, you will go far in this world. I have no doubt about that. With that, he exited outside to see to his forces. Western Forest. Amazing, just what did you learn, Naruto? Iruka could only look at the situation in awe, one of the shadowy beasts Naruto had summoned helping him to lean against the abandoned shed. Naruto assisted as well, fretting over his sensei's condition like a mother hen, only to suddenly back away skittishly. The boy looked up at him shyly, a look of trepidation on his face, as his sensei rested somewhat comfortably against the shed. Naruto, what's wrong? He was confused by the boy's sudden change. The boy only looked down forlornly, toeing the ground for a moment. He suddenly stiffened. Behind him, the three beasts whimpered quietly before vanishing once more into his shadow. As they vanished, Naruto suddenly bowed deeply, his arms stiff at his side. I'm sorry, Iruka-sensei. Because of me you got hurt and your parents. His shoulders shook slightly as he spoke. Before he could continue, he felt Iruka's hands on his shoulders. Pushing the boy back up, he looked him dead in the eye. No, Naruto, none of this is your fault. You aren't to blame for the Kyuubi either, you are the greatest guardian of this village. You aren't the demon, you've held the beast at bay from hurting anyone else for all these years. At this his eyes turned sad. I should be the one to apologize. I did blame you at first, but after I got to be around you more and came to understand you, I started to realize something: you are not the demon you contain. Just a young boy with a heavy burden who never gives up and always works hard despite the odds. You suffer so much, but power through all the better for it. You are Uzumaki Naruto of Konohagakure, a hero I should have seen sooner. Despite himself, Naruto had fat tears rolling down his face as Iruka spoke, sniffling as Iruka gave him a sad smile. Naruto, I have a gift for you. Close your eyes for me. The man requested suddenly. Confused at the surprise request, he complied nonetheless. Feeling his bandana removed, he felt a thicker, somewhat heavier cloth takes its place. As it tightened, he could hear the shadows around him suddenly get excited. You can open your eyes now. Hearing that, he opened his eyes, only to see the morning sun's rays fall all around Iruka. Highlighting the fact Iruka was missing something he had never seen his sensei without. His forehead protector. Congratulations Naruto, you graduate. A cheerful smile on his face, he watched as the boy's eyes slowly widened in realization. A smile slowly crept onto the blonde's face, soon a full, genuine and glowing smile lit his face brighter than the morning sun. Iruka-sensei. Diving forward, the boy hugged his sensei tightly. Laughing at the boy's reaction, Iruka expertly hid his flinch of pain. Naruto, I know you will do great things in the future. I truly believe you will accomplish your dreams. Western Forest Clearing. Morning. It hadn't been long after Naruto's trouncing of Mizuki that the Hokage and several of his Anbu showed up. It caused Naruto no small amount of anxiety when he was immediately surrounded by a dozen masked shinobi. Calming the panicking child down, Hiruzen had his subordinates take Mizuki to meet an ice interrogator. A few more would take Iruka off on a stretcher to be treated, armed with a vial of poison the traitorous ninja had used on him. Waving farewell to his injured sensei, Naruto turned to regard his leader with trepidation. Though the elderly man wasn't too particularly angry looking, he was assuredly upset about the damage the boy had done already. Handing the large scroll of seals to the Hokage, the boy sheepishly laughed and scratched his cloth eye patch nervously. Hey Gigi. Hiruzen regarded the boy for a few moments before he broke out in a surprising smile. Handing the scroll to a nearby Anbu, who promptly vanished, he lightly patted the boy on the head endearingly. You did well fighting Mizuki and defending Iruka, my boy. It was an impressive showing. Naruto preened under the adulation before the Hokage's hand increased greatly in strength upon his head. Saying that, you and I are going to my office to have a long talk, Naruto. A look of annoyance was on the leader's face, a gleam in his eye that hinted at his punishment to come. Ignoring the now shaking boy, he nodded to his Anbu and they all quickly vacated the clearing. Hokage's office. Morning. Now at his large desk, the elderly leader eyed the boy seated across from him. He was looking down at his feet, fidgeting in discomfort from the situation. Letting out a sigh, the man known as the professor removed his trademark hat and leaned forward to address the boy. I'm not truly upset with you, Naruto. From what you have told me and what I know of the situation, you are not really at fault here. Naruto looked up at his grandfather figure in surprise. Really? Indeed, you followed the instructions of the man who had helped oversee your trading for the last 5 years. There was no reason to doubt him, you were only following orders as a good shinobi would in the field. Finding reassurance in the old man's eyes, Naruto sat up straight and smiled slightly. Taking a breath, he looked Hiruzen in the eye and asked a question that had been eating at him all night. Was what Mizuki said really true? Do I have the Kyuubi inside me? The old man's eyes hardened for a moment before he turned to look out the window. Eyes full of regret, he answered the boy's question. Though the way he revealed it was poor, Mizuki told you the truth, I'm afraid. 12 years ago, the powerful Kyuubi no Kitsune attacked our village. Nothing we did could stop its rampage, however, the fourth Hokage came up with an idea. Though unkillable, it was possible to seal it within something. The only thing capable of keeping it sealed was a baby, whose undeveloped chakra network could adapt to the demon's energy and maintain a seal. You are the baby chosen for this terrible burden. The old man turned to look the boy directly in the eye, though, I must stress that you are in no way the demon, nor could you become the demon. Such is the strength of the seal that the fourth Hokage sacrificed himself to place on you. It will never be able to escape unless you will it. It is merely contained within you, transforming into what is known as a Jinchuriki. With his piece said, he once more leaned back into his chair and gave the genin time to understand the situation. Looking down once more, the boy's face was unreadable, a storm of emotions in his lone eye. Nodding slowly, the boy pondered his situation. Iruka and the shadows were right, then I'm only the container for the Kyuubi Jinchuriki power of human sacrifice. Maybe this was the sacrifice the king mentioned. I guess now all I need to know is what happens now. Seeing the boy come to terms with the situation, the Hokage gladly moved on to another topic. Well, now that you have received a field promotion from Iruka, I will have to wait until next week to see what we will do. At that, the boy's head tilted quizzically. What do you mean, Gigi? Field promotions aren't quite the same as graduation. As of right now, you are a genin of the village. As such, I will need to determine what can be done with you in regards to the other students who are trying to gain the same status. All of your former classmates must take a secondary test to determine their candidacy for genin in service of the village. Once we get the results of those tests, I can come up with a better schedule moving forward. Your training will be primarily with these graduates, but there are several genin teams in active duty that you'll end up training with. Finishing his explanation, the old man reached to his side drawer and grabbed his trusty pipe, lighting it as he watched Naruto mentally go over the situation once more. Taking a moment to think, Naruto looked at his Hokage. So, I just have to wait out the week then. Nodding, the old man let out a small puff of smoke towards the window. Tomorrow the teams will be assigned, and for the next few days the Jonin sensei will test them. After I get the results, we can see what can be done with you. At the very least, I'll ensure a few of the Jonin will add a fourth for training exercises. Nodding at that, Naruto suddenly yawned quite a bit. Sheepishly scratching the back of his head, he mumbled an apology to the chuckling Hiruzen. For now, we can end it seems you need some sleep. Head home today. Tomorrow morning I'll have an appointment set up for the picture for your shinobi ID. It'll be on the roof. Afterward, you can meet with me again, there's some more I wish to discuss with you. Taking a glance at the submitted schedule for the photographer, Hiruzen made a note for Naruto's appointment before letting the boy know of the appointment time. Standing up, at last, Naruto let out another long yawn. Nodding sleepily, he turned and left the office shortly, waving goodbye to his Gigi. Watching the door close, the old man reached into his desk to retrieve a paper. This one would be a message to his Jonin commander, Nara. There was something about the boy's newfound power he wished to discuss with the man before his meeting with Naruto. Another long day of work ahead thanks to that boy, Minato. Smiling wistfully, he summoned a Chunin messenger to send off his request. Naruto found himself alone in the early morning hours of the day. It was maybe 6 if the sun was a good indicator. The main street was empty of people, but he could hear and more importantly smell the rising village. Scents of forges firing up and bakeries letting loose their delectable smells reached the young shadow wielder's nose. Reaching down to his growling stomach, the boy turned down a side road to a bakery he favored the last few months. The owner was a retired shinobi from Konoha's ally, Sunagakure. Having gained citizenship here after retirement, the shinobi started up a bakery off the main road selling delicacies hardly sold from outside K's no Kuni. It had gained some decent popularity with the early risers of the village for his trademark breakfast bread, which was a small loaf of bread with eggs and bacon baked right in. The thought of which made the boy drool slightly and speed up towards his destination. Arriving at the small bakery, he could see the sign open proudly on display next to all manner of samples. Entering the shop with the tinkling of a bell, he walked to the counter and waited patiently. "Welcome to Desert's Dessert. What can I get you this fine morning?" From behind a curtain-covered doorway arrived the owner. A plain-looking middle-aged man with sandy blonde hair, wearing white clothes and an apron. The man was the very picture definition of a baker. In one motion he laid out a pan covered in delicious-smelling bread and moved to the counter before regarding the starving boy. "Ah. Naruto-kun, well, isn't this a surprise? I never see you around here so early. Staying out of trouble, I hope." He gave the boy an easygoing smile, leaning on his counter. "Eh? When am I ever in trouble, Ichiro Nai?" The deadpan look from the older man said it all. Rubbing the back of his head sheepishly, Naruto let out a nervous laugh. "Nothing bad this morning, okay. Gimme breakfast bread, would ya? I need to get home and go to sleep, I've been up all night." Pulling out his wallet from the shadow in his pocket, he readied the appropriate amount. Whatever you say, brat. One breakfast bread coming right up." Regarding the boy with a wry smile, he grabbed the requested food item and bagged it for him. Getting a sudden idea as he handed over the money, Naruto looked at the man with a questioning gaze. "Say, Nai-san, you used to be a big shot shinobi, right? You could say that, before I lost the arm, I was a chunin for the outer villages and Suna's territories." Waving the remains of his arm towards the boy, it was gone just past the elbow. He looked to him in curiosity. "What makes you ask? Do you know any good chakra control exercises? I can't get any farther with a leaf exercise, I need something better than that if I want to improve." The boy absently tore into the bread, moaning slightly at the taste. A full breakfast baked right into a bread, absolutely genius if he had to say so himself. "Well, I do know a few that are probably harder. Aren't you getting a Jonin sensei this week? They can probably get you something better suited to your needs." He watched a boy gobble the bread down with a grin, nothing better to a baker than seeing people enjoy your food. Swallowing the bread, Naruto gave the man a pleading look. "I got some special circumstance going on. No idea when I'll get a teacher, so a little help please." He put his hands together in a begging motion. Scratching the side of his head, Ichiro shrugged finally. "Well, I guess if that's how it is, it won't hurt to give you a few tips. I think I got one that'll help you out a lot if you know a place with some sand." Taking a thinking pose, the boy tried to come up with any places that had sand before his eyes shot open and he let out a wide grin. There's a waterfall next to that huge ravine near the edge of the village, it's like a little beach over there. Nodding, the man reached under his counter to grab a scroll and ink. Alright, that will work just fine. Might be better too, wet sand is harder to manipulate than dry because of the weight. This is a pretty standard mid-level exercise taught all around in Wind, so it's not really a problem if this gets out anyways. Making a hand seal over the scroll, the ink was instantly dried by a burst of wind. Rolling it up deftly with a flick of his wrist, he pushed it towards the boy. Grabbing the offered scroll, Naruto gave the man another grin. Thanks a bunch, Nai-san. I'll be sure to come by after I master it to thank you again. With that said, he ran out the door waving goodbye. The man let out a small laugh. Well, there's my good deed for the day. Now to get ready for the breakfast rush. With that though, the man went back to his business. Another 15 minutes of walking and eating and the boy finally made it back to his apartment. Unlocking the door, he removed his sandals before walking over to the single bed. Flopping down, he let out a drawn-out sigh and wiggled his way out of his clothes. Now only in his boxers, the exhausted boy quickly covered himself with his bedspread and went to sleep. The events of the night before running through his mind as the shadows around his room shifted comfortingly to block out the morning light. The newest youngling of the clan was very interesting, if the last night's adventure was any indicator of the future. As such, it was their duty to oversee the boy in place of the king who couldn't always be there for him. Interesting boy, yes. Time will tell. For now, sleep. The sky had turned shades of red and orange when the boy finally awoke from his slumber. Yawning with a wide stretch, he stood up and handled his business in the bathroom. Scratching his back, he made his way to his kitchenette and started to heat up some water for a quick ramen dinner. Training time. After some ramen, he yawned out half-heartedly. Waiting for the water to boil, he reached into his shadow and grabbed the control exercise scroll that he had received from the baker. Looking it over, he readied the ramen packets and leaned against the kitchen table. So, use chakra to create a pillar of sand with your hand. He scratched his eye patch idly as he tossed his ramen into the boiling water. Make the pillar thinner to up the difficulty. Once it gets to a 100 rim coin's width at standing shoulder height, the technique is mastered. That sounds kinda hard actually. Muttering to himself, he shrugged before returning to his food preparation. In short order, the food was seasoned and eaten in a few minutes. Nothing to it but to do it, he remarked confidently. Walking over to the corner of the room, he looked into the reflection of his floor-length mirror. A scrawny one-eyed blonde looked back at him. Removing his eye patch, he took a closer look at his shadowy eye. It wasn't a solid eye like he thought it was, more like a void of darkness with a faintly glowing blue iris. A black slit for a pupil and faint black smoky shadows coming from the sides, it made for an intimidating image. Focusing a little chakra to his eye, he watched as the glow got marginally brighter and the smoke increased slightly, giving him a stronger mystique. Cool, he muttered in awe, feeling the shadow energy fill his body as the shadows around his apartment reacted favorably to the power. Training time, yes. Turning to the darkened corner, Naruto nodded seriously. Yep, if I won't get a sensei for a while, I gotta get started on working on my abilities sooner rather than later. You guys up for trying to help? As you wish. Grinning at the faint excitement he could hear in the whispers, Naruto turned to his dresser and grabbed his usual training clothes. Soon dressed in black pants, with a burnt orange jacket over a black t-shirt, the boy grinned at his reflection. Looking good, eh? He struck a few poses, making sure to accent his glowing eye. Holding his hand up, he pushed chakra into it to make it glow as the shadows in the room darkened, and all he could see was the ominous glow of his eye and readied fist. Brat, quit playing with yourself, the shadows muttered behind him, disgruntled at his wasting of time. Sticking his tongue out at the vague shapes childishly, Naruto grabbed his ninja pouch and tossed it into his shadow. Yeah, whatever. You wish you looked this good. Deciding to put his headband onto his bicep instead of his forehead like was typical, he grabbed his sleeker leather eye patch and set out his window to go train. Waterfall Abyss. Sometime later, arriving at his destination, Naruto immediately got to work at his new chakra control exercise. Rereading the scroll once more, he took a moment to try and concentrate on his chakra. Kneeling down onto the beach, he pressed his hand against the soft sand and slowly began to lift his hand, forming a small mound of sand. He grinned happily, only for his slip and concentration to blast the sand from his palm and cause a cloud to cover himself in the grainy substance. Spitting out what got in his mouth, he glared lightly at the snickering shadows. Too much, ha! Muttering dark curses and ignoring his burning cheeks, Naruto once more attempted the exercise. This time he toned down on the chakra and blocked out all distractions and pulled a larger pillar of sand. It was easier to do the wider the sand was, allowing him time to get a grip on the exact amount of chakra he needed to lift the sand. As it got to his chest, he paused, feeling the flow of his chakra through the sand as he forced it to stand upright. Alright, now I just keep going until I lose control. Then I start from there. Next, affirming himself of his course of action, the boy continued his training dutifully. All around him the shadows watched, giving advice as well as they could and sometimes mocking the boy in good-hearted jest. While the Jinchuriki of the Leaf was napping and training, Konoha's staunch leader of many years was working hard for the betterment of the Fourth's legacy. Having set up the appointment with his commander at mid-morning, the Hokage grabbed a quick nap in his side office and freshened up to meet the man. Giving approval to his assistant, the scarred Jonin finally entered the office. The tall Jonin was rubbing his goatee lazily as he strolled in. Black hair pulled back into a bushy ponytail, shaped much like a pineapple, he was wearing mostly standard Jonin attire. As befitting a man of his status, he had a customized Jonin vest under a deerskin jacket with a mesh shirt on underneath that. Bowing and greeting, the man sat at the offered chair and patiently waited as the Hokage quickly finished his meal. "Late night, Hokage-sama?" he asked genially, watching the elderly man put his used plate to the side and regard him with a small smile. "Indeed, Shikaku-san." After retrieving the scroll from young Naruto, there were a great many things that had to be taken care of. Speaking of which, any reports on Mizuki? Eyes hardening at the traitor's name, Shikaku spoke after a moment. "Not really, he didn't really know a whole lot about his benefactor as we had hoped. He just kept repeating something about shadow demons until we put him under. Gotta say, I didn't know Uzumaki had it in him to thoroughly beat the man so hard. I didn't think the medics were even going to find the man's testicles after that kick." He let out a slight smile in remembrance. "Well, we have plenty of time to break him. Until then, there were some things I wanted to discuss with you regarding Naruto." The Nara sat up straighter at the statement. "How can I help, Hokage-sama? What do you know of the shadow contract that the Shodaime placed into the scroll of seals?" At this question, the Nara clan's leader had a much harder look on his face. "The contract is the reason the Nara clan is capable of using the shadows as weapons." "Don't tell me the boy activated the contract." He made it out alright. The Nara was worried. The last few members of his clan to attempt a contract with the Shadow King were found wanting in their sacrifices. The remains after the ritual was not pretty. He has, and surprisingly does not seem to come out of the ritual no worse for wear. From what I was able to see from the tail end of his fight with Mizuki, he was aptly skilled in using the shadows of his opponent to attack. He had even summoned some kind of shadow beasts to hold the Chunin in place while he beat him down. The Hokage explained to the shocked Nara. "Summoned shadow beasts? I've never heard of that before." This intrigued the Jonin. His clan was only one of the few success stories with the Shadow King's ritual for generations. The older generation had a tale about the ritual. Upon placing blood on the contract, the Shadow King would be summoned. He requested a sacrifice for his power. If it wasn't good enough, he would make his own request. Refusal would result in death for most people. Nodding at the tale, the Hokage had a grim look on his face. "How did your ancestor achieve his contract?" "A long time ago, during the Sage of Six Paths time, I believe, my clan's progenitor got his hands on the contract. The story goes that he had summoned the King of Shadows to create a shinobi clan in the king's honor, a way to help his clan survive during the Warring Clans era. When the king asked for his desired power, the ability to manipulate our own shadows and the shadows we connect to. When the king allowed the man to offer up his sacrifice, he had a stipulation that it would be a sacrifice his family will make for 100 generations. The aged Hokage had a thoughtful look on his face as he listened to the Nara's accounting of the story. "The sacrifice was?" he asked finally. "An emotional sacrifice, literally. It was something like, I shall give up the motivation for action, so not one of my future clan could seek to dominate your power. But I request them to be able to summon their strength when it truly matters." Something like that anyways, the exact terms have long since been lost to time. Finishing his story with a sigh, the Jonin commander sat back in his seat and watched his leader's face as he digested the information. "It certainly brings a new context towards your clan's personality quirks. From what I could see of Naruto, I couldn't detect any changes in his personality. I'm rather unsure of what price he paid to gain his powers, nor to the extent he had gained them." The elderly man stroked his beard in thought. The two men would continue their discussion for some time, trying to come up with a method to help the young genin with his newfound abilities. The next day found Uzumaki Naruto waking up rather early. After working hard into the late hours of the night, the boy had eventually achieved a satisfactory stopping point in his training and went home for the night. Having a filling breakfast, Naruto prepared for the day. Dressing in clean clothes similar to his outfit from the day before, he met the photographer and got his picture taken. Walking down into the building proper, he entered the lobby and let the Hokage's assistant know about his appointment and waited while the young Chunin alerted the leader. A few minutes later he received a signal to enter. With a wave to the assistant he walked into the old man's office. Seeing the man by himself in the room, Naruto walked up and handed him the registration form the photographer had given him with his picture. Seeing the young man's serious pose with his arms crossed and giving the camera stare down worthy of a bingo book, he couldn't help but smile. The boy's general demeanor and eye patch gave him a surprisingly mature picture. He had honestly half expected the boy to make a spectacle of himself. Nice picture, Naruto-kun. This will be the first things a client would see of you when missions are being delegated. Better to have a serious first impression than most anything else. Civilians tend to like the shinobi mystique when they pick guards. Having a seat, the young shinobi grinned while rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. I thought about a whole bunch of poses, but I felt this would work the best. Like someone out of an action movie, right? I've seen Jonin around the village act like that before when they pick up clients, so I thought it'd be a good idea. The Hokage nodded in understanding at the boy's reasoning. There was nothing wrong with trying to emulate the elite of the village. In some aspects anyway, a few Jonin came to mind as poor examples. Well, that aside, I wanted to talk to you about your new abilities you gained from the scroll. Looking at the boy seriously, he saw the boy straighten up in his seat. Nodding at the Hokage, Naruto spoke up, the shadow contract, right? Seeing the old man nod in confirmation, he continued. Well, the Shadow King gave me a contract. As long as I sacrifice chakra to my shadow eye, he explained the best he could with the aged shinobi nodding along as he continued his story. I see quite the useful ability you have acquired, my boy. I'm sure it will take you far in this world when you master it. I spoke with the Nara clan head, Shikaku, about your possible training. His clan is well renowned for their use of shadow-themed jutsu. Though, from what you told me, you don't really use hand seals, correct? At the boy's nod, he continued. If that's the case, they won't be able to do much more than assist you in the process of understanding the shadows. They won't disclose any clan techniques, but they have assured me they will help the best they can. Sometime next week you should head to the Nara compound for training. Naruto had a look of surprise at that. He vaguely remembered hearing from Shikamaru of his clan's special jutsu. They might be able to help him figure out how to do some of his more unique ideas he had bouncing around. Giving his grandfather figure a grateful nod. That's great, Gigi. Giving the boy a grandfatherly smile, he reached into his desk and gave the boy a small scroll he pulled from it. Here's a general workout regime. Typically genin are given this on team assignment, but since you have some time, I wanted to make sure you would be able to get ready for next week. Looking over the scroll, it looked simple enough with detailed instructions and rough sketches of various exercises. He could totally work with this, thanks Gigi. I'll get through this no problem, no doubt I'll be tuning in no time. The old man let out a few chuckles at the boy's confidence. Oh, the power of youthful exuberance. When the world is all yours for the taking, the leader thought wistfully, shaking his head at the boy's declaration. That's all for now, Naruto-kun. You may head out. He dismissed the boy with a wave. Gotcha, Gigi, I'll see you later. Standing, the boy walked off while dismissively tossing his scroll into the shadow of his pocket. Working a brow at the vanishing scroll, Hiruzen could only shake his head at the mysterious abilities the young genin had gained. There really was great potential in the boy's new capabilities. Arriving outside the Hokage's tower, Naruto stretched and breathed in deeply at finally getting some fresh air. That conversation had taken quite a long time. It was almost lunchtime at this point. Walking down the road, the boy contemplated his next course of action, seeing numerous genin walking around. The academy was right next to the Hokage's tower after all, so it made sense that so many were wondering about. Looks like the teams let out for lunch. I wonder who got assigned who. He saw some of his classmates walk off in groups of 2s and 3s, some left alone as well. Shrugging dismissively, he walked past them all. Oh well, I'll find out who I'll be training with next week. For now, lunch then more training. Nodding at his desired schedule, the shadow wielder jumped off to grab lunch. 5 minutes later he found himself at his favorite noodle shop. Yo. Can I get a large miso ramen? He called out, having a seat on one of the center stools. Behind the counter, a middle-aged man with gray hair and squinted eyes let out a friendly laugh. You got it, Naruto-kun. Hey AM, grab the kid a drink. He called out to the back room. Okay, father. Was the response from the back as a young woman with reddish-brown hair and similar clothes to the man and a white bandana, soon appearing with a cup and a tea kettle. Setting it down in front of the boy, she poured him a drink as she smiled at him and leaned against the counter. How's it going, Naruto-kun? It's been a while. She struck up a conversation as the boy sipped his tea. Well, I got mixed up in some stuff that was really weird, but I graduated. He thumbed the headband on his left bicep, proudly shining in the midday light. Eyes widening at the metallic symbol, AM clapped happily and quickly ran around to hug the graduate. Good job, Naruto-kun. You hear that, Dad? I told you he would pass. The man soon appeared, holding the bowl of noodle goodness. Would you look at that? I knew you could do it, Naruto. How about we give the newest shinobi a few bowls on the house in celebration, eh? Placing the bowl in front of the genin, he smiled proudly. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise. Really? Awesome. How about a beef and shrimp next then? He called out merrily. You got it. Naruto's week played out quite the same schedule-wise, training himself to best he could, according to the scroll the Hokage had given him. In addition to that, he would work on his chakra control with the sand pillar training, then spend the darker hours of the night working on his shadow techniques. Working himself into the dirt every day, the genin worked tirelessly in bettering himself until the weekend. It was Saturday night that he got an unexpected visitor during his night training. Hard at work young shade. Naruto quickly spun around in surprise, seeing the Shadow King in all his shadowy glory at the edge of his training clearing. Doing his best to calm his shaken heart, he calmed and finally smiled at the king. "Ah, you scared me again. You're way too sneaky, you know that. And that's coming from a ninja." He walked over to stand in front of the king. "One day you too will be capable of moving with the stealth of a shadow young shade. I've come to check on your progress, I hear your time has been eventful." Nodding at the king, Naruto thought back to that night. A whole lot had changed because of that night, though he wouldn't say he was regretful. "Yeah, that was a tough night. Thanks a lot for the contract, there's no telling what would have happened without you." He bowed slightly at the king, knowing he owed a lot to the being's help. "You summoned me, I merely provided the contracted power. Have you come up with any more techniques since then?" Giving the shadowy man a smirk, he nodded proudly. "I got two more or less figured out. Well, they're not both attacks, one's a supplementary technique for movement and one for ranged combat." Moving to the side, the boy activated his first new jutsu. Inten. Vanishing step. His shadow energy pulled the shadows toward his feet, each step causing a small burst of shadow to propel him forward at surprising speeds. He dashed all around the clearing, a blur to the naked eye. Turning at 90-degree angles, bounding about in all manner of unpredictable angles, he eventually stopped in front of the king once more. He still had much to learn on that one, if his stumbling stop in front of the king was any indication. Has still got some kinks to work out for that, zooming around is easy, it's the stops and turns that are hard. He grinned nervously at the king. The armored king only nodded simply, lightly patting the boy on the head. All it takes is time. Experience brings proficiency after all. Nonetheless, excellent use of your own shadow for movement, the second technique. Smiling at the praise, Naruto focused once more, he backed away and threw his hand out. "Come out." His shadow stretched out once more, his beasts rising from the darkness with howls. Standing before their lord and the king, they waited orders. Nodding once more, Naruto took a deep breath before activating his next technique. One of his wolves vanished to his side, forming a smoky mist that surrounded his right arm. With a burst of speed, he threw his fist forward, a loud crack was heard as his shadow beast projectile embedded into the tree, before even more crackling was heard as the shadow beast burrowed inside the tree. Soon it burst out the other side, the wolf landed gracefully as the tree crashed to the ground. The king narrowed his eyes as he regarded the damage done to the tree, an equally clever use of the shadow beast's transformative abilities. Quite a dangerous technique, it would quite disastrous if an opponent would be hit by that. Naruto nodded with his arms crossed, his eye glowing brightly in the darkness. Inten. Shadow Beast Blast. Yeah, I needed a decent utility ranged attack, I thought it'd be a good defense breaker when kunai and shuriken won't cut it. I've seen some of the chunin and jonin practice defense techniques, this should let me surprise them and get one of my shadow beasts in position at the same time. That one was actually easier than it looked, the shadow beast doing most of the work, with him providing the direction and propulsion. The king nodded at his reasoning, it was good to make use of the allies he had gained. The better he used them in combat, the stronger they all would get. Continue as you are, and you will become even stronger. I'll come back in a month's time to see you again. Should you impress me once more, I shall gift you a weapon of the clan. Oh, I guess I'll look forward to it then. He smirked at the prospect, a free weapon sounds pretty awesome to him. Nodding at the boy, the king turned and vanished from the clearing. Waving at the king's departure, Naruto turned and continued his training. Now that he had a few more techniques under his belt, it was time to make sure his other shinobi skills got up to snuff. Hokage's Tower, Mission Dispatch Room. Monday morning, the fated day had finally arrived. Having received a call from the Hokage, Naruto showed up this fine morning in excitement. The genin teams had finally solidified, though the boy heard only 3 of the program's 10 or so teams had actually passed the secondary test. The rest would either quit the program or retake the test in another 6 months. Didn't really matter to him though, he'd be working with the graduates mostly. Once he got some better training and gained experience, he would go work with other active shinobi squads. The young Uzumaki was leaning against the mission dispatch counter, thinking over what he had managed to learn over his past week of training. Reaching into his pouch, he pulled a small notebook from the shadow storage he had contained within. Let's see here, taking a pencil from the binding, he checked over his notes once more. Number 1. Shadow extraction isn't 100% guaranteed to work, plus there's some kind of limit on the number of attempts I can have on a single corpse. The boy thought back to the large bear he had stumbled upon the other day. At the edge of one of the training grounds, the one with the huge fence, if he remembered correctly, it had been thoroughly killed by kunai and left for the scavengers. It seemed time had an effect of his shadow extraction, since the dark shadowy mist and faint blue energy that he could normally see was nearly gone by the time he found the bear. Time limit, I guess. I called out 3 times and the shadow markers vanished, so there's a limit to attempts as well. Maybe I have to kill it myself. Gotta figure it out more, maybe go hunting this week after training. Next on the list was number 2, the regeneration of his shadow beasts. The fight against Mizuki showed him something important, his chakra was automatically pulled into his eye to get enough energy to repair the shadow beasts. Gotta keep an eye on that, running out of chakra in the middle of a fight could definitely be a big problem. Making a note in the margin for the observations, the boy decided it was a good idea to continue his chakra training after all. He needed more shinobi jutsu though, the chakra sacrificed for shadow jutsu didn't seem to be the same as using up chakra for a jutsu. He couldn't really feel his chakra stores growing any, if at all, as when he used to work himself too near chakra exhaustion, his larger than normal chakra reserves meant it wasn't a huge problem for now. Let's see number 3, shadow beasts are a lot more versatile than I thought. That one was a fun discovery, while he was testing out the extent of usefulness of his shadow beasts, he had learned some interesting things. They could move away from him at no distance restriction and could follow simple instruction no problem. He actually didn't need to say anything, there seemed to be some kind of mental link between him and his beasts that allowed for unspoken orders. They could also hide in other shadows, as he had learned in some experimentation. Using the shadow of a kunai he had one store itself inside. Throwing it some distance, he had it burst out and attack a straw dummy he had made. No doubt an oversized demonic-looking shadow wolf bursting out from a kunai would scare the hell of anyone he fought, the possibilities for it were mind-boggling. Naruto was giggling to himself in excitement, leading the Hokage and Iruka to give the boy odd looks as they sorted through the missions. Ignoring them he continued to look over his notes some more. The sand pillar training was pretty good for his control, he had actually recently been working on something he had stumbled upon by accident. He had decided to try lifting some of the other stones near the shore, seeing if it could work with the same concept for sand. He had inadvertently gotten stuck on large flat stone instead, discovering the adhesive properties of chakra. Wanting to figure out the extent of that aspect, he ended up trying to free climb the nearby cliff face with decent results. I wonder where else I can push the chakra to. Maybe to my feet too. That'd be cool, I'd double my climbing speed without having to worry about hand and foot holds. It was a cool thought, maybe he could go even farther than that and just run around with his feet only. Something to think on later, since the double doors to the mission distribution center opened at last. The first to arrive was a female jonin, dressed in some outfit dress that seemed to be oversized bandages with a black thorn design on them and a single red sleeve on her right arm. Long, black unruly hair behind her forehead protector and piercing crimson eyes, she stood out as quite the looker. Behind her were 3 of his classmates, the first being the spiky brown-haired Aburame Shino in his typical face, covering pale green overcoat and brown pants. Still wearing his round sunglasses, he was just as mysterious looking as the Uzumaki remembered. Then there was the young Kunoichi behind him, Hyuga Hinata, in her bulky beige jacket with fur trim and dark blue capri pants. The young girl was looking around shyly, her pale featureless wide eyes framed by dark blue Haim-styled hair. Her eyes widened when she saw him, her face turning a shade of red as she looked away from making eye contact with the boy. Oh, interesting. Naruto's eye twitched slightly as the shadows began to make odd cooing noises after seeing the girl's reaction. What the hell is with them? It's starting to piss me off. Shaking his head and doing his best to ignore them, he observed the final of his old classmates. Nara Shikamaru, he'd recognized that lazy walk and slouch anywhere. Wearing his typical look of boredom, the boy was in his usual outfit. Short-sleeved gray jacket over a mesh armor shirt and brown pants, his black hair in its typical spiky pineapple shape. As the Nara entered the room, he sensed an odd feeling in the room, vaguely feeling something that he couldn't quite put his finger on. Looking around the room, he didn't see anything out of place. Large rectangular room, large desk at the back with the Hokage and Iruka at it. Another off to the side with half a dozen or so chunin sorting through paperwork. Then he saw Naruto, who was leaning against the counter next to the Hokage, apparently waiting for something. His eyes suddenly narrowed, the Uzumaki looked a little different than he remembered. His eye seemed to have sharpened some as though he had gone through something important. His appearance, however, hadn't changed much, still dressed in his normal burnt orange jacket, black shirt, and black pants. He was wearing his cloth eye patch today, but other than that he couldn't see anything that would give him this feeling. It feels like he's darker somehow. Something feels off about the room, he couldn't really understand it, just an inkling in the back of his head. Shaking his head with a yawn, he decided it was too troublesome to think about anymore and followed his team to stand at the front of the Hokage and Iruka. "Teammate, reporting for pickup Hokage-sama," the woman announced as the 4 stood in somewhat attention. "Ah, Kurenai-san. As expected of you, right on time and ready for duty." The elderly leader gave the team a warm smile in greeting. He motioned towards the Jinchuriki, signaling the boy to move forward to greet the Jonin. Young Naruto here will be attached to your unit for the next few weeks of training and missions. Naruto greeted the woman with a nod, nice to meet you, I'm Uzumaki Naruto. The woman smiled at him kindly, Yuhi Kurenai. I assume you remember these three. Said three were looking at Naruto in varying states of curiosity. Giving them a friendly smile, Naruto nodded cheerfully, yeah, hasn't been that long. Hey Shikamaru, Hinata, Shino. He walked over to stand with the genin, making small talk as Kurenai spoke with the Hokage some more. Naruto-san. It is pleasant to see you again. Shino was quite succinct in his greeting. Hello Naruto-kun. The quiet greeting from the Hyuga heiress was normal, such an oddly shy girl. Yawn. I was wondering what had happened to you, Naruto. The Nara was looking particularly tired this morning. You could say I had to go through some troublesome things for graduation. The two shadow users let out a smirk at the blonde's use of the lazy genin's catchphrase. How's it been with you guys? Kurenai-sensei working this lazy bones too hard or something? He elbowed the yawning boy in the side, making said boy grumble under his breath. Slave-driving woman, I don't even get to watch the clouds or play shogi until late afternoon. He suppressed a shiver suddenly as his sensei glanced at him from the corner of her eye. Kurenai-sensei's training isn't that difficult. Shikamaru-kun. Hinata admonished the lazy boy quietly, defending their sensei's training methods. Kurenai-sensei has been pushing Shikamaru-san more after we passed her test on Tuesday, because without such effort, he would not train himself. The bug user's reply caused Naruto to snicker slightly, yeah, that sounds about right. Another one. No different, legacy user. Naruto quirked an eyebrow at the whispers, before remembering what the Hokage had told him last week. That's right, Shikamaru's whole clan uses shadows. But what's a legacy user? His clan's stuff came from the contract too. He moved away from his thoughts as Kurenai came back to them. Alright you four, we have training ground 11 reserved for the next 35 days. We'll be meeting there from now on, alright Naruto. At the boy's affirmative nod, she continued, for now let's go have a quick meal and we can head over for some training. Waving goodbye to the cage and their former sensei, the four genin followed their sensei out of the tower. The maid and their temporary addition left the tower in short order, soon after they arrived at a small cafe not too far from the Hokage's tower. Quickly getting a table, the five seated themselves, Shikamaru and Shino on one side with Hinata and Kurenai on the other with Naruto at the end. Everyone took a moment to order before they finally got settled to talk. Let's introduce ourselves again, so Naruto-san can get a little refresher on everyone. At the teacher's suggestion the rest of teammate nodded in understanding. I'll go first, my name is Yuhi Kurenai. I just recently became a jonin, with my main specialty in Jinjutsu. I like to come up with new Jinjutsu and hang out with my friends. I dislike people who think women can't be as strong as men and people who look down on Jinjutsu. My dream for the future is to see each of you make Chunin. Finishing her introduction with a smile, she looked toward a nearly napping Shikamaru next. Sighing as if the greatest burden ever was now on his shoulders, he sat up again. Guess I'll get this troublesome stuff over with. A lazy boy's words caused a round of eye rolls from the others. My name is Nara Shikamaru, my likes are cloud watching, naps, and shogi. I dislike people who are loud and people who try to force hardworking onto me. At this, he eyed a bemused Kurenai, before continuing with a muttered troublesome. My dreams for the future are to get to Chunin, find a woman who is neither ugly or pretty, and then have 2 kids. A boy and then a girl, then retire and live out the rest of my days playing shogi. Naruto could only shake his head at the Nara's unambitious dream, it was very much something the lazy genin would say. Hinata began next, her voice quiet in the bustle of the cafe. Ah no, my name is Hyuga Hinata, I like to press flowers, I don't like bullies or people who hurt others for no reason. My hope is to one day I'll lead the Hyuga clan and get away from the poor traditions we have now. The girl had a faint determined look in her eyes at her declaration, if it could be called such anyways. Despite her soft-spoken intro, it did add a new light to the young girl in the Uzumaki's mind. I always thought she was weird, always getting super quiet and shy all the time, but there really is more to her. I believe it is now my turn because I am the last one aside from Naruto-san. My name is Aburam Shino, my likes are learning about insects and finding new species to add to my collection. My dislikes are people who kill insects for no reason and those who belittle others. My ambition for the future is to become the head of the Aburam clan and produce stronger chakra beetles for the good of Konoha. Naruto was certain he had never heard Shino speak so much in a single sitting, odds were that wasn't going to happen all that often too. Coughing to clear his throat, he started his own introduction. Alright, my name is Uzumaki Naruto. I like my precious people, training, and ramen, though miso pork flavored for Michiraku is my favorite. My dislikes are people who hurt others just because they are stronger and anyone who thinks they can hurt my precious people and get away with it. My dream is to one day be Hokage, but for now, my goal is to get stronger and make that guy proud. That guy would be the Shadow King, who gave him power and a place in the clan he could rely on. He'd definitely show the king it was a good idea to make that contract, the Uzumaki had sworn on it. Before anyone could question who that guy was, everyone's food had arrived. Growling stomachs distracted them long enough to forget about it, each quickly saying a small thanks for the food and digging in with gusto. After some more small talk and finishing their meal, the five paid and jumped off to the training grounds. It had a wide clearing with a small hill in the back, a large oak tree on top of that. There were about half a dozen wooden posts strewn around the clearing and an irregular semicircle pattern for practicing techniques on. Having her students begin their warm-up exercises and stretches, Kurenai went to Naruto to ensure he knew what to do. Finding the boy doing the usual genin regime properly, she couldn't help but be surprised by the boy's aptitude. Good to see you have maintained good health, Naruto-san. Did someone give you the standard exercises? Standing once more from his stretch, Naruto nodded. Yeah, Hokage gave me a scroll for this stuff last week. I was already doing most of the workout anyways, it's just a little extra to add into my regime. Nodding at the genin's excellent work ethic, Kurenai couldn't help but smile. Well done, that's one less thing I need to go over then. Once everyone is done, we'll go through a few teamwork exercises and maybe some tracking training. Giving the woman a thumbs up, Naruto went back to his warm-up. 45 minutes later everyone was suitably warmed up and ready to go. The first exercise the Jonin chose was a simple one, everyone would throw a ball around without speaking and never allowing the ball to lose momentum. The goal was to communicate the desired location and recipient without vocal direction, a necessary skill out in the field. Plus, it had the added bonus of working their hand-eye coordination, which was never a downside. The four genin placed themselves randomly around the training posts, each would move during every throw to ensure difficulty. Choosing one at random, Kurenai tossed the ball and set the speed for the training. Starting off with Shino, who tossed it behind him towards Shikamaru with little more than a pointed look. Catching the slow-moving ball, he took a step back and pivoted it towards Naruto. Catching it easily enough, he tossed it from one hand to the other while spinning around to face Hinata. Throwing it underhand, the girl had little issue to catch it and threw it back to Shino over the other two's heads. Nodding at the decent first round, Kurenai motioned them to keep going. Switch around and keep increasing the speed every round, for now, stay on the ground. Later on, we'll add in jumping on the pillars or in the forest. At that, the four continued to toss the ball around. It lasted for 3 more rounds before the Nara made the first mistake, a rough throw from Naruto bounced off the training post to smack him in the head. Oops, sorry about that. Shikamaru. Naruto tried hard not to laugh at the red mark on the now grumpy Nara's head. But the muttered troublesome blonde under his breath he grabbed the ball and they continued the training. By the ends of the training, it looked less like a slow game of modified catch and more like an intense game of reverse dodgeball. The four had long realized that as long as the ball didn't hit the ground, it was still good to go. Bouncing the ball off the pillars to teammates across the clearing, the genin had caught on quite well. There were a few more missteps as the training grew faster and more complex, but the four had a solid grasp on the beginnings of nonverbal communication with their teammates by the end of the morning. A few hours later they once more stopped for lunch, chit-chatting as they ate at a nearby dango shop Kurenai frequented. After their meal, they went back for the afternoon training. The objective was to follow the somewhat obvious signs that Kurenai set up around the forest. Without using any special techniques or chakra, the four had to find their way through the trail to Kurenai. Thanks to the ever-observant Shino, it wasn't too much trouble for them to find the way the first time. Shikamaru proved he was just as capable if not more so, following a path almost directly towards their teacher in record time. While Hinata struggled at first, she managed to find the trail with assistance from the others when they happened upon a few tricky sites. Naruto himself had to nearly plug his ears, the shadows all too happy to help him out in the training. Some harsh whispers settled them down, causing his temporary team to give him odd looks. Laughing nervously while scratching his eye patch, the boy waved them off. Though curious, they left him alone as he led them through the afternoon. Soon each attempt through the training was harder as Kurenai began to set up trails that intersected former tests alongside false trails. Each genin getting a chance to lead the hunt, everyone got a good feel for their needs when it came to tracking. Finally calling the training done for the day just as the sun hit the horizon, Kurenai smiled at the four tired-looking genin. Trekking through the forest was a lot harder than tree jumping was, especially without using chakra, and at the end of the training they had hiked a solid 15 miles up, down, and around the hill-filled woods of the training grounds throughout the afternoon. Well done you guys, we got some good progress done today. I hope you all keep in mind the things you need to work on for next time. Seeing their tired nods, she dismissed the four. Watching their sensei vanish in a swirl of leaves, the four regarded each other as they caught their breath. That was a lot harder than I thought it'd be. Despite his impressive stamina, Naruto found himself a panting mess on the ground. He wasn't the only one, both Shikamaru and Hinata were laying on the ground as they caught their breath. Even the unflappable Shino was sitting against a nearby post, his chest moving deeply as he recovered. "Told you," Shikamaru muttered between breaths, reaching into his pouch to grab his canteen. Without the use of techniques or chakra at all, they four had to use their own unaltered strength to hike around. It taught them about themselves, with Shikamaru becoming well aware of his physical shortcomings and grudgingly realizing he needed to work harder. Shino understood he needed to push himself more in his physical training. While Hinata had managed to last longer than Shikamaru had, thanks to her own tough training under her father, she still fell behind Naruto and Shino. After a few more minutes of recovery, the first to stand was the Uzumaki. Stretching and letting out a loud groan, he relaxed as he felt a series of pops run through his spine. Offering a hand to his new teammates in turn, he helped Shikamaru and Shino to their feet. Hinata's face went tomato red at the offer, but he merely assumed it was the exertion of the day's training and took her hesitating hand firmly to lift her lithe form up. The other two boys watched in amusement as the obviously crushing Hyuga did her best to not faint at the contact. Quickly extricating herself away from the boy, she thanked him with a small bow, somewhat hiding behind a training post. Excusing herself, she bid the three boys goodnight and was the first of them to head home for the night. Next was Shino, quietly wishing the two well, he nodded and took his leave after the girl. Rubbing his neck tiredly, Shikamaru turned to the Uzumaki. "Feels like she worked us extra hard today, I think we have you to blame for that." Smirking at the disgruntled Nara, Naruto could only shrug. It's never bad to get some heavy training in, right? Besides, I bet it won't be quite so tough tomorrow. I think today was more about team bonding than anything else." The lazy shadow user could understand that today wasn't intense in physical work, not really anyways. It was more building team trust, as well as determined strengths and weaknesses in leadership positions. Looking around the evening light of the clearing, the boy reflected on his training for the day. It was then a memory popped up in the back of his mind. "Oh yeah, my dad said that you could come over this weekend for that training the Hokage set up. What exactly are you gonna be training with us for?" He looked at the boy curiously, wondering what his clan could be helping the blonde with. "Gotcha, as for what, you'll learn about it sooner or later." That, and he wasn't exactly sure to what extent he should reveal his abilities. From what the Hokage told him, the shadow contract wasn't exactly something that was widespread knowledge. It might be better to hold some cards close to the chest. He wasn't exactly sure who actually knew about what when it came to his powers now. Narrowing his eyes at the vague reply, the Nara ultimately decided it was too troublesome to fret over. It was only a matter of time until he found out, and the boy was nothing if not patient. "Whatever, I'll know when it becomes important to know. Until then, see you tomorrow, Naruto." Giving the boy a lazy wave, the Nara walked off to his clan compound. Got to tell his dad he had delivered the news and that he might need some tips on training up his stamina. Watching his final teammate leave, the Uzumaki looked around the clearing. Finding the clearing completely void of others, he nodded to himself and jumped into the trees to go deeper into the forest. "Time for some different training, plus I gotta figure out just what I can show them when the time comes." The next few days passed quite the same for the modified teammate. Every other day had chakraless entered training to work on their physical abilities. They repeated the tracking training a few times, though the team building exercises varied. They each also learned the various team formations for the numerous possible situations they'd be going through in time. From escort practice to stealth ambush tactics, the genin were subjected to a varying schedule over the course of the week. Kurenai was sure to put them through the ringer, directing them through several exercises to better improve their weaknesses. It was good to understand their own weaknesses, so that could work to improve themselves in the long run. After the day training was done, Naruto would continue his late night training. Working with the shadows, he managed to refine his control over shadow energy. Using the tips on meditation that Kurenai had given him, he managed to get a better understanding of the energy he was replacing his chakra with. Achieving a decent level of meditation, he was better able to feel the way the energy interacted with his body. While he wasn't completely sure, he did feel that shadow energy was more difficult to detect than chakra. It would be a boon if he could get it confirmed with one of the sensors in the village. "Maybe I should go ask Ino, isn't her dad a sensor type? I bet she could tell me." Filing that thought away for later, the boy continued his mental training in the art of the shadows. Taking a cue from the shadows, Naruto would spend a few days trying to modify his inten dark spires to better make it adaptable in different situations. His first success was in transforming the deadly spikes to bludgeoning fists. Upon achieving that regularly, he worked on varying the size and speed of the techniques, even going so far as have the attack intersect and smash together at a single point until he got a sudden flash of inspiration. Summoning the shadows to his front, he had the shadowy columns crisscross in front of him to form an interwoven shield. Working through several shapes, he finally settled on something the shadows described to him, calling it a tower shield to defend his front. Throughout the week he worked on increasing the speed of the shield summoning, as well as converting from attack to defense and vice versa at increasing speeds. It was Friday night when he was finally satisfied enough with them both to consider them usable in low-risk battle, dubbing his newest techniques Inten. Dark Weave Barrier and Inten. Dark Assault. Getting stronger. Well done. Finished. Yawning, Naruto nodded to the shadows that had accompanied him during his training. It had taken time, but he could kinda tell the difference between the shadowy figures that followed him. They frequently changed, some staying with him for days at a time, while others would be there a few short hours. Nonetheless, he appreciated their company during his training. It was thanks to their tips and hints that he was progressing as well as he was. He could also feel them help him manipulate the shadows for his techniques, acting as training wheels to help him figure out the process on his own. Gathering his supplies and equipment, Naruto jumped off into the trees towards his apartment. He had an appointment with the Nara clan in the morning to get some rest for. There were plenty of ideas going through his head, hopefully, the shadow specialists would be able to help him out. Smirking at the prospects, Naruto vanished into the darkness. That Saturday morning found our budding Shadow Lord awakening with a mighty yawn. Smacking his lips and rubbing his sleep-encrusted eyes, the boy stumbled his way to the bathroom to get ready for the day. A quick bathroom break, followed by an invigorating shower, and the boy was finally amongst the living. Making a simple breakfast with the previous night's rice and miso soup dinner, the boy added some fried eggs for that protein boost and was fueled for the day. Summoning his shadow beasts to clean up, he brushed his teeth and got dressed in his typical training outfit once more. After ensuring everything was shipshape for his departure, his beasts returned to his shadow, and the boy left his apartment humming a quiet tune to himself. Heading to the eastern portion of the village, the boy took his time to get to the clan districts. Having left a bit before 8:30, the boy had given himself plenty of time to get to the compound. Leisurely hopping from roof to roof, it took him 15 minutes to reach his destination. It was a rather average-looking compound, without the flair the Uchiha had enjoyed or the rigid uniformity that the Hyuga clan favored. The clan territory was marked by simple stone walls, with the wavy lines within a circle that marked the Nara clan's emblem. He could see several different houses all along the property. Numerous hills dotted the landscape, with much of the forest left untouched by the Nara clan, as they built their houses and shops along the main road leading to the clan leader's house. They were average-looking houses, decorated with the clan symbol and the odd plant or deerskin created trinket. Beige in color, with darker brown trim, the houses blended quite well with the thick forest he could see behind them all. The Nara's special forest, no doubt, where they kept their herds of unique deer for meat and medicinal purposes of the village. Despite the early hour, Naruto could see a few groups of Naras walking around, either on patrol or heading to work for the morning. Each one bore a passing resemblance towards Shikamaru, all having black hair with the males wearing it in that trademark pineapple-like ponytail. Must be a clan tradition or something, Naruto muttered to himself quietly, passing by a group of 3 men, all lazily sauntering along the road out of the compound. Each had the same hairstyle, perhaps individuality is too troublesome. The genin couldn't help but snicker at his lame joke, the behavior of the clan members matching the sheer lazy bored feeling that Shikamaru always gave off. Continuing his way to the clan head's house, Naruto soon arrived to knock on the door. Though he was a little nervous at the moment, he wasn't well liked by most of the village. Now that he knew why, he could kind of understand the scared look sometimes, but the dark glares are completely ignoring his existence. Those were the looks he hated the most. He was quietly hoping that Shikamaru's parents weren't like the villagers were. Giving the door a few strong knocks, the boy waited patiently as faint footsteps could be heard from inside. His patience was rewarded as the door opened to reveal a middle-aged woman with long brown hair tied in a low ponytail. Wearing a pink blouse and a dark skirt under a wide apron, the woman was the perfect picture of a housewife. "Yes?" she asked curiously. Bowing slightly and greeting, the boy introduced himself respectfully, "Uzumaki Naruto, I'm here for the training that the Hokage set up." Her eyes widened in realization as she regarded the boy in front of her in greater detail. "Oh. I'm a little surprised you're here already, we weren't really sure when you'd arrive." She stepped to the side and invited the boy in. Giving the young genin a pleasant smile and greeting, she introduced herself, "I'm Nara Yoshino, Shikamaru's mom. He and Shikaku are out on the patio playing shogi, just follow me." Allowing the boy time to remove his sandals, she led him through the house towards a large patio door at the end of the building. Naruto looked around the house as he walked through. The small entryway led to a large sitting room. Off of that, he could see a hallway to the left, the kitchen through a dining room to his right. Nicely decorated with earth-colored furniture, along with several photos of the happy family from numerous points in their life. "Nice to meet you," he began politely. "I'm actually a little surprised Shikamaru is awake already. I thought for sure he'd be passed out until noon." He joked, causing the woman no small amount of amusement. "Laughs, no doubt he would have if I let him have his way. But Shikaku insisted he be up to help out with your training." He decided to use it as an excuse to get the lazy kid working on the next steps of his shadow jutsu himself. "That lazy bum needs a kick in the pants every once in a while, but I'm more than happy to do it." The jovial way the mother spoke brought a smile to the Uzumaki's face. Shikamaru may have always complained about his mother during training, but it was clear she cared for the boy. Arriving at the glass doors, the housewife opened them and called out to her family. "Hey, you two, finish up your game. Naruto-kun is already here for his training." Lightly patting the boy on the back, she directed him out the door to see the two Nara sitting on the floor, a large wooden shogi board between them. "Alright dear, thanks for bringing him here." He saw a large, scarred adult version of Shikamaru smile at the woman. Yeah, he couldn't look any more like his dad without getting those scars, and the goatee on his face, the Uzumaki could easily see the resemblance between the two. He idly wondered if he took after his father or mother that much as well. Shaking his head of those thoughts, he walked forward to stand at the side of the game. Yoshino smiled at them before bidding the three goodbye to head back inside to her other chores for the morning. "Hey Naruto, go ahead and take a seat. We're almost done with this match, I finally got my old man on the ropes." Naruto could only quirk an eyebrow as he heard the excitement in the normally indifferent boy. The Nara's father could only smirk and chuckle at his son's confidence before moving a piece from his barely touched corner right into the center of the board. Naruto watched curiously as the confident smirk on Shikamaru's face fell considerably with each passing second. Not even a minute later and the boy angrily ruffled his own hair, falling backward he let out a sigh. "I give up, I really thought I had you that time." Standing up with a few more chuckles at his son's expense, the Nara patriarch offered his hand to the Uzumaki. "You were closer than normal, son, but you got a little too preoccupied with what I was doing at the front to remember the moves I made in the back. Good to meet you Naruto, I've heard interesting things from Hokage-sama." Taking the Jonin's hand and greeting Naruto could only smirk at the downtrodden Nara air. "Good to meet you too. I take it he hasn't beat you before." At the question Shikamaru let out an irate grunt towards the blonde, giving him a half-hearted glare out the corner of his eye. The look of amusement lit of the clan head's face as he nodded at the question. "He's been trying to beat me ever since he first learned the game. He's gotten close sometimes, but he's still missing that bigger picture viewpoint he needs to beat me." Sighing at his father's words, Shikamaru sat up and put the pieces of the shogi board away. Standing up with a stretch he turned to the other two. "Whatever you say, Dad. How about we get Naruto's training started? I've been wondering what exactly we're supposed to be training him for all week." Guru and I had never gotten around to putting them in jutsu requiring situations, focusing on getting their teamwork and strategy skills to higher levels. The fact that 3/4 of the team were clan heirs made it easier to push the jutsu training to the back burner while they worked on more important skills. "You didn't tell him?" "Wasn't really sure what I could share actually." I doubt he would have said anything to anyone but me, but I understand. Whatever you pick to reveal I'll go along with, no need to reveal everything all at once, eh? Might fry his brain." Shikamaru's eye twitched in irritation as the two talked as if he wasn't there. "Let's just go." With a grumpy huff, the irate Nara waited impatiently as his father walked off to the training building behind the main house. A few minutes of walking along the wooden path and the three shinobi arrived at the indoor training grounds, favored by the shadow-wielding clan. It made the curious Shikamaru even more confused as they entered the specially designed building. "Just what kind of training can we do here with Naruto?" Built like a medium-sized gymnasium, the floor had all manner of objects strewn about. Various lights dotted the walls and ceilings, some natural candles or torches, while others were mechanical lights of varying brightness. In the far end of the large room were several training puppets to use for the clan's trademark shadow possession jutsu. Naruto looked around the room as Shikaku turned on the main overhead lights. It was bigger than it looked outside. He looked around all the various equipment all over the place. He could see numerous shadows being tossed about by the lights. No doubt it was a good place the Nara clan could make use of to training their unique techniques in many possible scenarios. "Well, first things first Naruto. What do you have to work with right now? Once I get a read on what you have and where you want to go, we can move on from there." Shikaku instructed the boy as he led him towards a rather empty portion of the training room. It looked to be a sparring circle about 15 feet wide. "I've been doing work with my first technique, branching off of that. I'm just having issues and trying to figure out the limits I have to work in." The boy began to channel chakra to his eye, feeling the energy of the shadows flow through him once more as he readied himself to display his basic techniques. "Alright, show me what you got." Standing back with a confused Shikamaru, the clan head motioned for the boy to continue. "First up, Inton. Dark spires." He flicked his hand out suddenly, a series of deadly-looking spike made of shadows bursting from in front of him. They each grew to several feet, forming a rough line in front of the boy to the other end of the circle. Shikamaru's eyes widened comically as he saw the boy command the shadows to his bidding, seeing as the Uzumaki soon activated two more techniques he hadn't heard of before. As the spike receded, Naruto's shadowy eye glowed beneath his eye patch. With his power flowing through him he activated his next techniques. A dozen shadowy fists appeared before him, in various positions around the ring. They all stretched out to pound onto a single point in the ring, loud bangs sounding throughout in the room. Soon they stopped their assault, only to turn on Naruto himself. Without flinching, the boy closed his outstretched hand, a look of concentration on his face. Right in front of him, his own shadow stretched slightly and shot up intersecting strips of shadows. They formed a thick shadowy shield in front of the boy as each of the fists slammed into it. A multitude of loud slams reverberated through the training hall. As the assault ended, Naruto allowed the shadows to return to their natural state. Turning to see the two Nara's reaction, he wasn't disappointed as he saw a thoroughly shocked Shikamaru gazing back at him. Besides the shell-shocked boy was his equally surprised father. Damn, only 2 weeks and he's got those kinds of techniques up his sleeves. Plus, with those shadow beasts of his, I doubt we have a Chunin that could withstand that assault and keep fighting. The clan leader could imagine the possible scenarios the boy could use those techniques in. Each of those impacts from those shadow fists would have left one hell of a bruise on a normal human. Yet the boy's shield had handled them without anything worse than some noise, displaying a sturdiness comparable to steel. Whistles whew, those are some pretty good moves you got there, Naruto. The speed of those spikes and strength in those fists definitely merit C rank. We'd have to see how good that shield is against elemental attacks, but it's definitely at least C rank, maybe even B if it can hold up. Shikaku was quite impressed with the boy's jutsu. Shikamaru, on the other hand, was frozen in place, gaping like a fish out of water. His eyes widened at the display Naruto dished out, his mind struggled to come to grips with the situation. He just when did he how I don't even indeed, the boy's mind was racing and not quite making sense yet. Naruto scratched his head sheepishly, he didn't think the jutsu he had come up with would be so good. C-rank jutsu was also known as combat-ready jutsu, they were the optimal grade you could use in active combat. Similar to the Uchiha clan's Grand Fireball jutsu, they were what high gen and low chunin used to fight opposing ninja out in the field. While smoke figuratively came from his son's ears, Shikaku walked forward to impart some knowledge on the young Shadow Lord. Tell me Naruto, what do you know about the shadows themselves? The boy furrowed his brow in thought, a few things came to mind, but not really sure if it was what the Nara wanted. Ultimately deciding to err on the side of caution, he looked to Shikaku in curiosity. I guess I don't really know a whole lot. I mean, I figured out that the shadows are kind like a liquid and solid at the same time. They are super adaptable and able to be used in a variety of ways. Listing what he figured out to the clan leader, he saw the man nod approvingly. That's a decent assessment for someone without any dedicated training on the subject. The shadows can be a little bit of everything actually, gas, solid, and liquid. It just depends on the application. He formed a rat hand sign, manipulating his shadow to spread across the floor. He showcased a few of the clan's techniques on the dummies on the opposite side of the room. Naruto watched in fascination as the dummies followed the man's movements, only for shadowy hands to creep up their wooden bodies and let out a sharp crack as they snapped the dummies' necks. The young genin watched in fascination as the older jonin went through a few more tricks in shadow manipulation before he started speaking again. Our clan primarily uses our personal shadows to fight, along with targeting the shadows of our enemies. Unlike your combat-oriented attacks, ours are built better towards capture and containment. Though we also have jutsu capable of inflicting damage, it requires more tactical battlefield management than your techniques. Though that is not to say that the shadows are without weakness. If we can't get a strong enough light source to cast a dark enough shadow, our techniques lose much of their effectiveness. In addition to that, we have to be wary of fire and lightning jutsu. Both can cut through shadow jutsu very easily, which is why it's important to have backup plans in place to prevent mission failure or death damage. Naruto nodded as he soaked in the information, it made sense to the boy. Plus, the shadows were whispering their own advice on the subject as well. Much of it was matching the Jonin commander's lecture. Darkness enhances strength, fire lightning through weakness. It was here that Shikamaru's brain finally rebooted and he immediately walked towards the blonde, a desire for answers burning in his mind. Okay, what the hell is going on? How did Naruto do all that? He didn't use any hand signs at all. He stood beside the two, looking between them rapidly with wide eyes. The other shinobi glanced at each other before Shikaku simply motioned at Naruto finally. You want answers, you ask him. I ain't saying anything he doesn't want me to, he's entitled to his own secrets. Washing his hands of the situation, he dropped his technique and made a motion for Naruto to take the lead of the discussion. Chuckling nervously at the rather heated look Shikamaru was giving him, Naruto gave the irate boy an abridged version of how he got his powers. Shadow contract, made a deal with the king, just been powering through on his own without much guidance. No need to let them know I could bring back the dead shadows or that the shadows talk to me. Some things are better left unsaid. Affirming himself of these thoughts, he finished his edited explanation to the young Nara, who looked like he was gaining one hell of a headache if the way he was rubbing the bridge of his nose was any indicator. So troublesome, I swear you are the most unpredictable person I have ever met. His eye twitched as he saw Naruto smirk at the proclamation. That's not a good thing. Shaking his head at the snickering boy, he turned back toward his father. So now what? Leaning away from the wall, Shikaku stepped forward to stand in front of the two boys. Now we train, I'll show Naruto one of our shadow immersion meditations while you work on your shadow neck bind. Letting out a sigh and muttering under his breath, the Nara heir nodded at his father's directions before he moved over to the practice dummies. Meanwhile, Naruto followed the older Nara to the corner of the room where it was darkest in the training hall. Following the older man's instructions for the meditation, Naruto sat quietly in the corner and let his shadowy energy flow through him once more. Directing the shadows to cover his body, Naruto began the process of feeling the power of the shadows, for lack of a better word. As the minutes ticked by into that first hour, the boy unknowingly began to enter deeper into the darkness until his form all but vanished. Open your eyes. Interesting. At the shadow's whispers, Naruto opened his eyes to see what the fuss was about. Only for his eyes to widen significantly, the view before him shocking the boy. Nothing but pure darkness as far as he could see, with faint beams of light appearing from numerous places from some kind of ceiling a few feet above his head. Whoa, what the hell is going on? He looked around his position, standing and turning around to get a better look. Shadow plane. Entered it. The boy could only blink in confusion as he hesitantly walked towards one of the closer faint beams of light. Looking into the irregular shape on the shadowy ceiling, he was surprised to see Shikamaru above him. Though the vision was distorted, as if he was seeing it through a fisheye lens, he could see the Nara practicing his techniques in the training hall. He watched as the light shifted to follow the boy's shadow along the floor. Looking around, he spotted Shikaku's shadow as well. Just a few feet away, the man himself was visibly leaning against a nearby post. His eyes widened in realization at what he had inadvertently done. Holy crap, I can go into shadows too, he proclamation caused the two Naras to jump in surprise. Naruto? Where the hell are you? The genin cried out, looking around for the owner of the voice that just yelled in his ear. Shikaku looked back toward the corner of the room, seeing Naruto no longer in his meditative position as he was just 5 minutes ago. Down here, I guess. I think I'm in your shadow. Both Nara immediately looked down, not really seeing anything out of place, despite clearly hearing the boy's voice coming from Shikamaru's shadow. Okay then, do you mind coming up? Kinda need to figure out how that's even possible. Shikaku was quickly realizing that the Uzumaki was definitely not using the shadows the same as the Nara clan was. Entering someone's shadow. Never been heard of, their own maybe, for the most powerful of shadow users. But for others it just wasn't a viable option, it would require a stronger control than the Nara clan had. Naruto blinked once more in confusion, how would he get back up there again? As if reading his mind, the floor raised a boy up to slowly appear from Nara's shadow. A few moments later and a heavily darkened Naruto stood before the two Nara, the shadows slowly creeping off his form to reveal himself in full color once more. That was trippy, it is super dark down there. The two could only give the boy blank looks at his rather lame statement. That's all you have to say? That's impossible. I've never heard of someone entering another person's shadow. Right away the Nara genin laid into the blonde, bombarding him with questions and statements on the impossibility of what had just transpired. Scratching his head, Shikaku could only sigh at the position he was now in. That old cage sure did like to keep him on his toes, didn't he? I think it's safe to say that we have no idea just how much potential Naruto has. He hasn't even shown us his shadow beasts yet, just what else does he have up his sleeves? Letting out another sigh, the man walked forward to save the blonde and restart the two on their respective training. It was going to be a long day. The hours ticked by as Naruto got pointers and training methods to better understand the forces he was working with. Meanwhile, Shikamaru was slowly adjusting to the thought of having a shadow using Naruto be a thing in his life. It was noon when the Jonin called for a break, calling the spar the two were having to a close. Appearing from his better improved movement technique, Naruto stood before the Jonin while Shikamaru tiredly sauntered towards them. Let's go get lunch for now, boys. We can get started again after we eat and relax for a while. At the two's nods, he led them out back towards his home. Behind him, he could hear the two talking about their training. Thanks for those tips, Shikamaru. Vanishing step is getting way easier to control now. No problem, I'm sure you would have gotten it figured out soon enough. It's crazy how good you are getting when it comes to controlling the shadows. He could only grumble at the ease that the other boy had. It was almost as if the shadows were happily following the blonde's commands like obedient dogs. Laughing off the tired genin's words, Naruto turned his head away innocently. Yeah, better not tell them the shadows are actively helping me improve. He might blow a fuse or something. Arriving back at the main house, the three were greeted by Shikaku's wife just as they walked in. Oh. Good timing, boys, I was just about to come to get you three. Lunch is almost ready, go wash up and I'll get it finished. She was smiling happily at them, already on her way back to the kitchen to finish off the meal. Yes, dear mom. The two Nara chorused, moving to go wash up. Meanwhile, Naruto stood there a little confused, hesitantly waiting for a moment. Hospitality wasn't something he got a whole lot of outside a select few people. He also wasn't expecting them to feed him or anything, maybe he should head out now to get something. Before the boy could jump to any conclusion, Shikamaru popped his head back into the room. What are you waiting for? Come clean up before mom throws a fit, that's a headache I don't need today. Dragging the blonde to the bathroom, the two quickly cleaned up and readied themselves for lunch. Training had resumed once more after the lovely lunch the Naras and Uzumaki had. Naruto was pleasantly surprised at the civility of the adults. No offensive glares or muttered remarks, just a simple nice meal between the family of three and the Jinchuriki. After the initial meeting and the training, Naruto was sure they weren't that kind of people, but he had been wrong before. The afternoon training happened outside in the back forests of the clan's grounds. There they tried to test out the extent of Naruto's unique shadow entering ability. Over the course of the afternoon, they had discovered a few things about its effectiveness. First, Naruto could enter the shadows from any location suitably big enough. So long as he could squeeze his body through it, it was a viable entrance. However, the restriction was darkness, he couldn't enter the shadows in the midday light. But deeper in the forest he was able to do so, allowing him to slowly sink into the shadows after some meditation. Second, it took time for him to go into the shadows. Unlike his shadow storage ability, he wasn't able to simply will it to happen on command. He had to enter a meditative state for a few minutes at least to create an entrance to the shadow plane. This was something the two Naras believed would go away with time, it was only a lack of experience that caused this problem. They'd also discovered something shocking about his shadow powers in general. A spar between the two genin and jutsu had led to Shikamaru dodging the blonde's attacks and manipulated him into position to capture the Jinchuriki's shadow. It didn't go down all that well, as the second his shadow hit Naruto's it simply stopped. It was as if Shikamaru's shadow suddenly refused to adhere to the jutsu. It failed to connect fully to Naruto's shadow and prevented the shadow possession jutsu from activating at all. No amount of trying allowed the technique to go through, to the utter confusion of both the Nara men. Even Shikaku, with his substantially more impressive control, was unable to control the young Uzumaki at all. There was still a lot they had to figure out about Naruto's unique ability, but that was all the time they had for the day. It was dusk when Shikaku finally called an end to their training. Alright you two, I think that's enough for the day. Seeing the grateful nod of his son and the cheery thumbs up of the Uzumaki, the Nara clan head led them back to his home. Arriving back at their home, Naruto spoke up, thanks a lot for the help today, I really figured out a lot of stuff. No problem, kid. Hokage-sama asked us to, but I would have helped either way. Not too many people make a deal with the king and live to tell about it. The older Nara simply waved the gratitude away, it was an interesting day with a lot to learn for everyone. Shikamaru was much less nonchalant about it, still can't believe you. Such a troublesome guy. Naruto only smirked at his fellow genin, everything he had done that day had just thrown the boy for a loop. Feel free to come back next weekend for more training, it's not so bad having you around to help motivate. Shikamaru, hearing his son grumble some more under his breath, brought a smile to the scarred Jonin's face. Definitely, I already feel stronger after just one day. At the Uzumaki's declaration, he clenched a fist and patted his arm in a grand showing. Hearing a sigh from the younger Nara, Naruto grinned and said his goodbyes to the two. Bidding the Nara matriarch farewell as she stepped outside to greet them, Naruto jumped off into the village. How did the training go with Naruto-kun? She asked as her two boys followed her into the room. Not bad, he's a good kid. Gonna be one hell of a shinobi in the future. Such a troublesome blonde, I think this will be more annoying than if I was on Ino's team. Ishino could only smile in amusement at their statements, watching them head to clean up after their training. She could tell that despite his complaining, Shikamaru had a fun day in training. Having someone his age to train within the shadowy arts got the boy to work a little harder. Naruto spent the rest of his weekend training in his home. He had to get a better understanding of the new place he had discovered, figure out the ways he could use it for his shinobi career. Already he could see its applications in spying, though he had no idea how long or far he could go into the shadow plane. There was still much for the boy to learn, maybe something to ask the king about in a few weeks' time. Thoughts for another time, the boy diligently continued his training under the helpful eyes of the shadows. When Monday rolled around, teammate dutifully jumped back into training. Stamina exercises, stealth, and tracking drills, along with formation and strategy training, the four went into it with gusto. Kurenai had waited until that Thursday morning to come to her decision, it was time for them to move on to the next step as ninja in training. Arriving at the mission dispatch center of the Hokage's tower, Kurenai informed her team of their new schedule. I am pleased to say that you four have been doing splendidly in training. At this, the four genin showed pride in their own ways at the compliment. As such, I think it's time we move on to missions and a bit more advanced training. We have a solid grasp on teamwork now, it's time we work on jutsu collaboration. Grinning excitedly at the prospect, Naruto was raring to go. Shikamaru only let out a sigh, more work then. Troublesome. Hinata ducked her head down, shyly poking her fingers together in hesitance. She hoped it wasn't going to be too much for her to handle. Shino merely nodded his assent at his sensei. It was only a matter of time before they reached this point. Taking in her team's reactions, the Jonin spoke up once more. We'll be meeting here at 8 AM every weekday, where I'll pick out our missions for the day. Don't expect too much though, fresh genin teams can only take D-rank missions for the first month or so of training. Seeing her team nod in understanding, the woman smiled and continued. I'll try to get 2 missions, that way you guys can get valuable experience and we can have the mornings filled out. After lunch, we'll head back to the training grounds for the next step in team training. We'll be figuring out the best way to combine your fighting styles to achieve the purpose of our team. Naruto raised his hand to ask a question. What's the team's purpose, Kurenai-sensei? Looking at the questioning blonde, the Jonin answered him. Teammate is designated as a capture and containment squad. All of you were placed in this team for your abilities to shut down enemy combatants. It's why I have been training you guys in tracking as well. You're being groomed to be able to hunt down enemies and capture them safely. It made sense to the Uzumaki, from what he knew of his teammates in the training that they have done so far, they weren't really frontline combatants. Well, maybe Hinata if she was a lot more confident in herself. That gentle fist was a doozy in hand-to-hand fights. He wasn't totally sure what Shino could do, but figured he was capable in his own right. He also knew firsthand how effective the Nara clan's techniques were, even if they weren't totally effective against him. Shaking himself from his thoughts, Naruto followed his team for their first mission as shinobi of the village hidden in the leaves. Shinobi is the main military of the elemental nations. Wielding supernatural powers, the likes that many could only dream of, they were the beings of fantasy and adventure. Many young kids were told of the brave exploits of the greatest shinobi across the continent. Sarutobi Hiruzen, the professor, called such for his extensive mastery over hundreds of different jutsu. Also known as the god of shinobi for his nigh unmatched prowess in a battle for the good of Konoha. Hanzu the Salamander, the unbelievably powerful ruler of a megacore and the man who single-handedly pushed the legendary students of Hiruzen to the brink of death. Inoki the Fence-Sitter, the third Tsuchikage of Iwagakure. His mastery of the unique dust release made him an enemy that few would attempt to combat. These 3 men mark the great 3 pillars of the shinobi world, with hundreds of stories of their exploits circulating around the world. Tales of fantastic combat, daring adventures, the unyielding spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. Indeed, the mere mention of their epitaph was enough to draw attention to the tales. Illusions of grandeur were the norm for many of the fresh-faced genin as they entered their respective mission disbursement centers. High-octane fantasies of saving princesses and fighting bad guys for the greater good, many had become shinobi for these very reasons. One Uzumaki Naruto was among these starry-eyed youth, visions of great battles and glorious conquests in his path to become Hokage. This is so not a mission. He was no longer starry-eyed, it seems. It is not among the options I thought of as well. Shino was of the same thought process. Nearing the end of his second month as an official genin of Konoha, Naruto and the rest of Team 8 got to experience the joys of D-rank missions. Babysitting the children of council members, gardening for the elderly of the village, even walking the mundane dogs that the Inuyasha clan raised for civilians. They were a far cry from the romanticized stories they had grown up listening to. Team 8 found itself at a multi-objective mission this morning. Inside were Hinata and Shikamaru, the kunoichi watching the young toddlers of the house, while the lazy genin was stuck cleaning the house itself. Naruto and Shino, on the other hand, were out in the morning sun. The backyard had long since been abandoned to neglect, now teeming with overgrown weeds and other plant life. The young Aburam was tasked with clearing out unwanted insects and other pests. Using his own chakra beetles, Shino was aptly equipped to handle his task at hand. Naruto found it ironic that they were using bugs to get rid of bugs. The Uzumaki, however, was given the job of weeding what will eventually be the garden of the yard. It wasn't particularly hard, a simple question to the shadows gave him a method he could easily handle. Could the shadows eat all the plants the client wanted to go? He had whispered to the shadows. No problem, simple request. A little shadow energy and his shadow expanded to cover the yard, all the unwanted plants slowly sinking to vanish into the darkness. In a few short minutes, the invasive species were all eradicated from the yard with no trace remaining. Shino watched this happening with a neutral expression, his own insects hard at work in the background. Your shadow powers are simply astonishing because they have such versatile applications to every situation. The monotones of his voice sounding out in the quiet yard. Naruto turned to regard the boy. They have their uses, he remarked modestly. The reveal of the Uzumaki's shadow powers a few weeks ago was a shock to the remainder of Team 8. Kurenai was briefed on his abilities, though given strict orders to not reveal anything more than the boy did. Shino took it in stride, long since understanding that the enigma that was Uzumaki Naruto was a guy that was hard to understand. Ever since the boy had his accident during the night of the Uchiha massacre he had changed. He worked harder to raise his class rank, surprisingly hitting just past the middle mark in the class. His scores in both written and practical had risen dramatically, while his prankster spirit had tempered greatly. He was more serious and focused, but at the same time had still not lost his cheerful disposition, which brought the Aburam an odd sense of comfort. Nara was shocked to see the young Shadow Lord's techniques in their first advanced training session. The versatility of his techniques was surprising to the young girl. Both a deadly attack and sturdy defense in almost a single motion. It was inspiring to the young girl to see her crush get so much stronger after graduation. It motivated her to work harder on her own abilities. She couldn't be left behind by Naruto. Unknowing of his teammates' thoughts, Naruto proceeded to use the client's old push mower to start trimming the lawn. The sight of a struggling and grumbling Naruto was what greeted Kurenai as she left the house. Coming to check on the two boys' progress, she was somewhat surprised to see them essentially finished with their tasks. Taking a moment to watch Naruto maneuver the rusty push mower with some difficulty to finish the lawn, she shouldn't help but shake her head at the boys' situation. Pausing to hide her amusement at her little Genin's problem, she greeted the two boys, "Hey you two. The client will be returning soon, so I wanted to see your progress." Waving at his sensei, a grumpy Naruto made a teetering motion with his hand, "I'm about done back here, more or less anyways. Just gotta get the front and I'm good." Shino adjusted his glasses as he spoke up, "My colony has removed all pertinent insects and other pests from the area. Now we simply need to put up deterrents to prevent future infestation." Nodding to the two, she went back inside to get everything ready for the client's return. It was somewhat unusual for the Jonin sensei to be so active for a D-rank mission, but Kurenai felt that her hands-on approach made for higher efficiency. Even she didn't want to be doing these D-ranks for too much longer. An hour later and just before lunch, the client finally returned. The wife of a lower council member, the woman had required a great deal of help. Twin births just a few months ago had driven her to a harried state, making her request a mission to get the morning to rejuvenate herself at one of Konoha's delightful spas. Inspecting the finely trimmed lawn, the well-cleaned house, and her precious little girl's calmly sleeping faces, she was truly happy with the job well done by teammate. "Thank you so much. I keep telling my husband to get us a nanny or something, but he is just too cheap to do it." She heartily shook Kurenai's hand, gleefully happy at the work done. Taking a moment to look at the genin, she noticed Naruto and Shikamaru's disheveled states. "Let me sign the confirmation, you guys look like you need a break." An accident while cleaning the study of the house left Shikamaru in a poor mood. What kind of idiot stacks books on top of magazines like that? Damn near had a full bookcase dropped on my head. It was a troublesome mission for the Nara. Receiving the signed paper from the client, Kurenai and her team bowed in farewell and left the property. Walking in front of the four, Kurenai regarded them for a moment. If she had to describe their overall appearances, disregarding Shikamaru's glare, then she would have to say they were all bored. Naruto had a grumpy look on his face, with Shino having a barely perceptible frown on his partially covered face. Hinata may have enjoyed taking care of the little ones, but even she had a desire for excitement. Shikamaru just looked like he wanted to take a bath and a nap, probably not in that order. "How about we call it for the day? I'll go report into the mission office, you guys can head home and relax. I think I'll request something special tomorrow." Perking up at their sensei's words, Shikamaru gladly pounced on the opportunity and hopped off with a quiet goodbye. A round of sweat drops for the remaining genin as they saw the boy run away. Naruto looked towards Kurenai, "What kind of mission are we doing tomorrow?" "You'll find out in the morning, I'll need to look over what's available first." Nodding and understanding, the boy turned down the next fork in the road. "Gotcha sensei, I'll see you guys later then." Waving goodbye to Shino and Hinata, he trekked off to get some lunch. The nice big meal at Ichiraku's ramen shop gave the Uzumaki all the energy he needed for the rest of the day. Deciding against running off to train right away, he idly walked about the village to help digest his food. All around him he could see the villagers going on about their day. Singles, couples, and families spending time together in this afternoon of spring. Soon after he began his walk, he noticed several of the people around him regarded the boy warily, as if he was an explosive tag seconds away from going off. It was the same for as long as he could remember, people looking at him like one would a dangerous animal. It used to frustrate him when he experienced it, but now that he knew the truth, he could understand it. It didn't mean he forgave them for being assets, but he understood their feelings. It was the ones who looked at him in hatred that he couldn't understand. As if he could control the actions of the Kyuubi before he was born. The worst looks were the ones he received the most when someone's gaze landed on him, they would go dull and dark. As if they were gazing at a piece of garbage on the road, they would immediately ignore him as if he wasn't there. They were the hardest to endure because it was as if they were saying, "Why are you even alive?" Feeling a sense of frustration welling up inside of him, he decided to hop up to the roofs instead. He was foolish to believe that the villagers would behave better just because he was serving the village as a shinobi now, they still didn't trust him. Bastards, I'll show them, be happy I'm not the monster you think I am, or else you would all be dead by now. These dark thoughts went through his mind as he headed towards his home, no longer feeling as motivated to go training today. It was the first time in months that the boy had gone out into the village by himself. In his team he was able to avoid the looks, the villagers too distracted by his teammates to care about him. He only ever trained nowadays as well, spending most of his time in the forest or in his room practicing his abilities. Focusing back on his surrounding once more, Naruto made his way back towards his apartment to get some shadow training done. Hopping over the road, he stopped on the roof of a bar well known around the neighborhood. Something interesting was happening below. His reason for pausing his journey home was a series of loud voices coming from the street below him. Curiosity getting the better of him, he leaned over the side to see what the fuss was about. He witnessed a group of 3 men talking loudly as they gathered around a young woman. The 3 men looked pretty average run-of-the-mill thugs. The young woman they were accosting looked quite pretty, wearing a traveler's kimono and long hair pulled into a fancy braided ponytail. Taking in the situation, he used his training to analyze the event. It was just after 1, so probably midday drinkers without any self-control. A quick glance around the road showed the odd fact that not a single bystander was willing to interfere with the situation, so maybe the thugs had some clout. No ninja nearby, from what his limited chakra sense was able to tell. Shadow said as much as well, no one of any real use would be coming to help the young lady. All the people on the road were turning an uncomfortable blind eye to the situation as they passed the 4x. He focused on their voices for a moment to better learn about the situation. What do you say, missy? Wanna come and play with us? It'll be worth your while. Believe us. Cue the lecherous laughs and overt perverse motions as the 3 invaded the woman's personal space. Naruto could only tilt his head in confusion at the scene, since when was life like a manga? Seriously, broad-ass daylight and they're acting out a scene from a frickin' shounen. Shrugging at the sheer stupidity of the event, he stood up and gathered his shadow energy in preparation for handling the situation. Crossing his arms in front of him, he opened his hands as if grasping something. Below him, 2 of the men's shadows darkened considerably and a series of hands burst from them to grab a hold of the men. Before they could even comprehend the situation, Naruto closed his fists and thrust his hands down. The shadows copied his motion and gripped the men to slam them roughly into the dirt. The 3rd man spun around at the sudden noise, only to see his cohorts on the ground in a daze. He never saw the feet dropping on him from above as Naruto stomped the man into the dirt. Ensuring the 3 were thoroughly in the lands of dreams now, Naruto turned to offer the young woman a reassuring smile. You okay? Looked like you needed a hand there. Her eyes widened at his rather theatric entrance. The young woman gave the preteen a grateful look. Oh my. Thank you so much. Those 3 were so nice at first too, they had been accosting me for so long, I thought no one would come to help me. She looked around the road and gave the negligent bystanders harsh looks, all of whom quickly vacated the area to avoid her gaze. She quickly turned back to her savior, taking in his features for the first time in full. The black jacket with dark orange trim over a mesh armor shirt, black pants tied down with combat tape, and the usual shinobi sandals. Mid-length spiky locks fell around his eyes, down to his whiskered cheeks. Looking into his vibrant azure blue eye, she couldn't help but look at his covered eye in interest. If not for his age, he looked every bit the shinobi she had always pictured. As she looked him over, Naruto did the same for her. She was a few years older than him, her figure still filling out from its current modest state. She had a traveling kimono colored mainly orange with yellow flowers adorning it. Simple sandals on her feet, as well as a small handbag, clutched in her hands. Her extremely long brown hair was pulled into quite the fancy braid, reaching down to the back of her knees. Her bright brown eyes were looking at him in interest, her face twisted in a cute look of curiosity. Catching herself staring at the boy, she quickly bowed to him in gratitude. Oh my, forgive me for staring. It's just the first time I've seen a ninja in action. Naruto simply waved her apologies off. No problem, it can be rather exciting in a ninja village. He paused for a moment and looked back at the 3 unconscious men on the ground. Maybe we should get out of here, he muttered idly, watching them twitch and groan in pain. Oh. Yes, that would be best, wouldn't it? She quickly agreed with him, following the genin back towards the safer center of the village. A few minutes later and the 2 arrived at a small cafe that teammate had frequented the last few weeks. Taking a seat at one of the outside tables and quickly ordering some tea, Naruto decided to introduce himself at last to the former damsel in distress. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, nice to meet you. Accompanying his words with a slight bow of the head. How I've forgotten my manners. It's a pleasure to meet you Naruto-san, my name is Kimura Tsaya, she once more bowed to the genin. So, I gotta ask, how exactly did you end up in that situation? What were you doing there with those guys? He leaned forward on his elbows as he waited for her answer. Taking a moment to gather her thoughts, the young woman began her explanation. My mother and I have been traveling around Hai no Kuni for the last few months for her work. She's an artist, you see. We've been traveling around to increase her notoriety by painting the amazing landscapes and famous people of the nation. Naruto nodded along to her story. Seeing this, she gave him a smile and continued her tale. We made it to Konoha just a few days ago. Everything was just so interesting since this is the first shinobi village I have ever visited. I just had to go out and explore everything. The tea arrived at this point, the two sipping on it as she continued her story with a less than happy look on her face. Oh, today I got a little lost and ended up over there with those men. They were kind at first, showing me around the local restaurants and museums. But they ended up acting way different after we visited one of the museums. After that they just kind of followed me around acting like degenerates until we got to that bar, and that's when you showed up. Naruto leaned back in his chair and considered the girl's story. Sudden personality shifts. Could have done some day drinking, they honestly looked the type. But it wasn't fair to judge them simply by that since they had been decent people at first when they lead her around the village. Ninjutsu, maybe. But what for? A pair of traveling artists doesn't merit much attention. Could they be spies then? His eyes narrowed at that thought, his shinobi paranoia appearing in full force. It could have been a sting by the Anbuhim, maybe not. The shadows couldn't find any shinobi in the immediate area, so who could have been watching the operation? Shaking his head at his ludicrous thoughts, Naruto decided to put those thoughts behind him. He could just be overthinking the situation, not everything had hidden layers just because it happens in a ninja village. Returning his attention to Tsaya, he made small talk with the girl as the two enjoyed the tea. After some time, Naruto deemed it safe enough to take the girl to her hotel. Ensuring he got a heads up on any potentially bad situations, thanks to some happy assistance from the shadows, the genin led the young teen to her room. It was one of the nicer hotels in Konoha, one frequented by the affluent visitors and lesser diplomats that would arrive in the village. The two had barely stepped into the lobby when the young girl was quickly grabbed by an older woman. Naruto could only blink in surprise at the rather amusing situation, watching as Tsaya was twirled about in a bear hug by who he assumed was her mother. She looked exactly like her daughter, only a few years older. Stunningly beautiful and tall, she looked closer to an actress than an artist in her exquisitely designed gold and red kimono. Setting her daughter down and calming herself, the woman immediately got into her questioning. "Where have you been? I was so worried." Tsaya had a rather guilty look on her face at seeing her mother's distraught face. "I got lost in the village and got into some trouble. But Naruto-san here was there to save me. I'm okay, Kasen." "What? What kind of trouble?" Her frantic voice made the girl squeak in surprise as she was jostled. Tsaya immediately explained the situation to her mother, smiling brightly when she got to the parts of her story where Naruto gallantly saved her from the three men. At the mention of his good deed, the woman turned to regard the young genin. Looking him up and down, she analyzed him for a minute. Feeling rather uncomfortable at her gaze, Naruto couldn't help but fidget in place as he waited for her to speak. A little scrawny, the boy twitched at that, but he looks capable. "Thank you for keeping my daughter safe." She gave the boy a warm smile and bowed to him in gratitude. Turning his head to the side, the boy scratched the side of his covered eye idly with a slightly embarrassed blush on his face. "Why yeah, it was no problem, it wasn't that difficult." Smiling at his modest acceptance, she stood up straight once more. "Still, thank you for keeping her safe. Let me introduce myself, my name is Kimura Midori. Ah, I'm Uzumaki Naruto, genin of Konoha." Naruto nodded towards her in greeting. "A pleasure, Naruto-kun. Please allow me to reward you for keeping my daughter safe." She grabbed the boy's hand with a pleading look on her face. "Oh no, that's fine. I don't need any reward, I just did what anyone would have done in that situation." He nervously pulled his hand away and took a step back to get some space. The woman followed him, a look of determination on her face as she grabbed his hand once more. "I'm afraid I have to insist, Naruto-kun. There's no telling just what my poor Tsu-chan could have gone through if it wasn't for your help. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night knowing I hadn't rewarded the brave young man who saved my daughter." Now distinctly uncomfortable at both the woman's insistence and proximity to him, he caved into her demand. "If you insist so much, I guess it would be rude to refuse then, huh?" A bright smile lit up the woman's face as she nodded repeatedly. "Yes, of course. I'll get it prepared right away. I'm sure you'll love it." With that said, she gave the boy a powerful hug and immediately left to go work on his reward. Left behind by her mother, Tsaya could only stand in utter silence and humiliation at her mother's actions. Chancing a look at her savior's face, she could see complete confusion at the situation. "Sorry about that, Kasen can get a little intense sometimes." "Yeah, no kidding. So, I'm gonna go make sure she doesn't do anything over the top. Have a good night, Naruto-san." Giving the boy a parting bow, she quickly left to check on her mother. Naruto just sat there, red-faced and confounded as the shadows merrily chatted behind him. He's broken. Interesting times. The next day came quickly for the blonde genin. Making his way home the day previously with the intent on putting the exuberant woman's antics behind him, he relaxed the rest of the day instead of training. Around dinner time a message from Kurenai popped up by his window, courtesy of the village's avian messenger service. Detailing a meet-up time at the tower and to prepare for the special mission she had chosen. Whatever it was going to last about 2 or 3 weeks, so he had to prepare for it just like Kurenai taught them. Waking up extra early this morning, he began by using the method Kurenai showed them. Extra clothes, spare rations, and bedroll tent, along with a few extra dozen kunai and shuriken. Making sure to gather all his supplies for whatever it is they could be doing, he tossed his gear into the shadow inside his pouch and backpack. Dressed in his typical black and dark orange jacket, mesh armor shirt and black taped-off pants, he double-checked his gear one last time and left his apartment. Locking it behind him, he dashed out to the open air and made his way to the Hokage's tower to meet his team. As he made his way to the meeting spot, Naruto couldn't help but think about how everything had been progressing since that first training session at the Nara clan's compound. He had put in dozens of hours a week in his own personal training, not only in his shadowy control, but also his chakra control. He had made fantastic progress in his discovered chakra control exercise, now fully capable of running around the side of cliffs and trees as if he were on the ground. Likewise, he had progressed in the sand pillar exercise given by his baker friend, achieving the Ryo-sized pillar just this week. He made a mental note to ask Kurenai for more control exercises after the mission. Speaking of Kurenai, she had certainly put them through more advanced exercises after their first few weeks. Advanced combat tactics, stronger exercises to boost their physical capabilities, strategy meetings, and many others to come. His shadow abilities had grown in leaps and bounds as well. Showcased by his knockout technique used yesterday, he no longer had to take a good amount of time to gather his energy. He was also discovering how to make more flowing attacks, learning to manipulate the shadows to fight with simple movements. Not really true newly created jutsu, but a kind of supplemental mid-range style he was slowly building up. He felt he had really improved with his training, much of it thanks to his sensei. He was definitely going to get her a gratitude present one of these days. Finally arriving at the tower, he saw his Kunoichi teammate waiting in front by herself. Landing quietly next to her, he let out a quiet good morning, Hinata-chan. The surprised girl let out a quiet squeak as she jumped to face her teammate. Face flushed at his sudden arrival, she pressed her index fingers together as she gave him a shy greeting. Good morning, Naruto-kun. You been here long? And no, maybe a few minutes. Good, any idea what the mission is about? Kurenai's message was kind of vague. He leaned against the wall next to the girl as he spoke. Hinata shook her head, I'm not sure Shino-kun thought it might be a C rank though. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that, really? When did he say that? 5 minutes ago, Naruto-san. Holding back a yelp of surprise, Naruto spun around to see his Abiram teammate standing next to him. Whoa. When did you show up? He pointed at the quiet brunette animatedly. Readjusting his sunglasses, Shino spoke in a faintly irritated voice, I have been here for some time, could it be that you failed to notice me, Naruto-san? No way, bud. I just feeling at a loss for words, Naruto nervously looking at the insect wielder and slowly dropped his hand. He decided to turn back to Hinata instead. C rank huh? Sounds like fun, I wonder what they'll make us do for that. Behind them, Shino let out a quiet grunt of irritation and sulked away from the two. This was something that kept happening lately, was he blending too well? Ignoring the sulking Shino, the other two chatted amiably about the possible missions until the remainder of their team arrived. Some time had passed, almost 20 minutes after the meeting time, and the three were getting curious about their missing team's whereabouts. Kurenai was almost compulsively on time and punctual in her meetings, so it was something to note when she was late. Soon the three saw two figures walking towards them. Walking lethargically behind Kurenai was a certain lazy Nara, who was already yawning and grumbling this morning. Kurenai had a slightly miffed look on her own face, no doubt the Nara's fault. Good morning guys, sorry about the late arrival. Shikamaru failed to wake up this morning and his mother had me come pick him up. She ignored the scoff and muttered troublesome woman behind her. No problem sensei, we haven't been waiting that long, Naruto reassured her as Hinata and Shino stood beside him. Great, let's head inside. The clients will be waiting with Hokage-sama. Following their teacher, teammate made their way to the VIP section of the mission disbursement office. Getting the okay from the receptionist, the five entered the meeting room to see their aged leader. Sitting at the long meeting table, they saw Hiruzen chatting amiably with a beautiful woman and another young girl. Both were dressed in vibrantly colored outfits, the older woman in a red flowery kimono, while the younger was in a kimono with orange with blue bird designs. Naruto's eye widened significantly as the three turned to greet teammate. Fun times incoming, indeed. Teammate has finally arrived. Hiruzen had an amused look on his face as he saw the young Uzumaki's face. Fantastic. I'm so excited to get going. The woman was positively ecstatic at seeing the team enter. Bowing in greeting, Kurenai had her team lined up behind her as she greeted their future clients. Teammate reporting for duty, Hokage-sama. The younger woman stood up and smiled brightly as she greeted them, her eyes lighting up upon spotting the gaping Uzumaki. "Wonderful, it's great to see you again, Naruto-kun. We'll be in your care." With that, she bowed to the confused teammate. "What?" Naruto couldn't help but grumble as he fiddled about with his new cloak, a gift from teammate's client for this C-rank mission. Of all the people to do a C-rank for, what were the odds of it being someone he had just saved their daughter the day before? He wasn't too upset about it, since a C-rank was still a C-rank after all. Nor was he unhappy with their clients, the charming mother-daughter pair made for excellent company. No, the problem he was having right now was the fact that the C-rank escort mission was almost as mind-numbingly boring as D-ranks were before. He sat on top of the carriage his client used to travel around the country. Teammate had been out on the road for a few hours now, it being just after lunch at this time. Hinata was inside with the clients, her Byakugan activating intermittently to check the perimeter. Meanwhile, Shino and Shikamaru were with the other merchant caravan that was tagging along with them. Naruto turned to see Shino up front with the driver, while Shikamaru was lazing about on top of the covered goods in the back. Waving at the two, he got responding waves back. It was all clear for them too, the team's first C-rank was well underway. Apparently, Midori had made friends with a merchant who wanted to head to the same destination. Since this wasn't expected to be an intense mission, they just had to pay a bonus fee, and teammate got put in charge of two parties. The excitement of leaving the village for copious amounts of travel had long since vanished. Sighing as he looked at the wilderness around him, he attempted to spot anything in the trees to occupy his time. Again, finding his field of view absent of anything noteworthy, he once more went about messing with his newest addition to his outfit. Midori had been highly appreciative of the boy's actions the previous day, as such, she had decided to get him a reward befitting his accomplishments. Being talked out of a lavish outfit by her daughter, she decided to gather more information on the boy. Talking to the aged Hokage as she attempted to set up her escort mission, gave her an idea and let her kill two birds with one stone. "I guess this is kind of cool, definitely better than anything I have," he thought as he admired the cloak. Pitch black cloth with numerous ceramic plates, metal rings, and special chakra-sensitive threads interwoven throughout the cloak. It had protection from stabbing attacks, blunt force was better negated as well. It didn't cover his body fully, just over his arms and upper legs. He supposed it was some combination of shawl cloak that was surprisingly light, breezy and sturdy. It had a rather narrow hood, which he was currently using to stave off the bright sun. Shadowing his face, he decided it was a good gift and he should be appreciative of it. Simply gazing about the horizon for a while, he soon realized that his behind was decidedly numb from sitting for so long. As such, Naruto hopped up to his feet and jumped down to walk beside the moving carriage in an attempt of alleviating his problem. "Something wrong, Naruto?" The voice of his teacher sounded out behind him. Turning to the woman, he gave out a dry chuckle. "No, not really, but I'm starting to go numb from sitting up there for so long." Amusement on her face, Kurenai nodded at his statement. "I see, well if you want to get moving to get the blood flowing, go ahead and scout out ahead. The reports from this upcoming area state that there's been an increase in animal attacks around here. Although they aren't very clear on what kind of animal it is." "Really? Alright, I'll take a look around." Saluting the woman, he turned and ran off ahead of the caravan. "Will he be okay, Kurenai-san?" The Jonin turned to see the younger of the two Kimura women looking at her in concern from the open window of the carriage. Naruto has made amazing progress in his training so far, some wolves or bears won't be a big threat to him. Besides I doubt we'll run into anything too dangerous out on the main road, the daimyo has his militia run patrols every so often. It's about as safe as could be, given the circumstances. Nodding at the reassurance of teammates commander, Saya turned back to the inside of the carriage. She found her mother fawning over the cute Kunoichi set to guard them, the red-faced Hinata on the woman's lap as she messed with the genin's hair. Making eye contact with the poor girl, Saya could see the plea for help. She could only sweat drop at her mother's enthusiasm. "I only turned away for a minute." She sighed at her mother's antics and moved to help the genin. "Be careful, Naruto-kun." Naruto was decidedly happier with scouting around than sitting sentry on top of a carriage. Jumping through the trees he looked every direction for any clues of living creatures nearby. A cursory search near the main road didn't reveal anything out of the ordinary. Though he did spot some old wheel tracks, probably a day old from the indentations, and what looked like deer droppings. Nothing that would have alarms going off though. Thinking for a moment, Naruto came up with an idea. Taking a minute to stop, he looked at the caravan far behind him. His vanishing step technique was fantastic for long-distance traveling, allowing him extreme speed movement for decent bursts at a time. All the while he was barely feeling any stamina drain from the few miles he had traveled. Checking the distance to the caravan, he was certain he was out of range for Hinata's jutsu. No need for the girl to see this jutsu of his, plus it had been a while since he brought out his beasts. Holding his hand out he let out his command, "Come out." His shadow expanded and the faint howls of animals could be heard from an unknown source around him. Rising from the darkness were three large creatures, each covered in a black smoke, while faint blue energy wafted off their forms. The three shadow wolves stood at attention before the young shadow lord, awaiting his commands. Giving his shadow beasts a grin, Naruto began speaking. "Hey guys, been a while huh?" The three bowed their heads in greeting. "Alright, since it's been so long since you stretched your legs, how about you guys sniff around? See if there's anything around here that can threaten that caravan." Pointing at the minuscule caravan a distance away over his shoulder with his thumb, he watched as the three former wolves nodded and dispersed. Each had assumed a vague, almost liquid-like smoky form as they vanished and reappeared throughout the shaded forest, reforming into their solid forms to pause at certain places to smell the air or scrutinize a marking. While his wolves scouted out the forest floor, Naruto grabbed his canteen to take a swig. Hai no Kuni was normally such a nice temperate country, it was surprising just how hot it was today. Even if they were heading south towards the coast, it was still hotter than normal. Deciding to snack a little, he brought out a piece of jerky to chew on while he moved on. The rapid flutter of wings was his only warning, the boy diving backward as a large bird slashed through the branch he had been on. He looked at the creature in surprise, seeing what seemed to be a falcon of some kind hover 10 feet in front of him. It was certainly bigger than anything he had ever seen though, almost 4 feet in height with a massive 12-foot wingspan. Primarily brown in color, he saw wide underbelly and razor-sharp talons gripping his recently dropped jerky. "Boy. What the hell?" He paused as he saw his snack. "Hey, that's my jerky." Letting out a petulant cry, the boy glared daggers at the oversized bird. Said bird seemed to regard the boy for a moment before dismissing him and letting out a loud cry. The bird flapped its powerful wings and flew to a nearby branch to chow down on its pilfered snack. Twitching in irritation from the lack of respect from the bird, Naruto decided he needed a new shadow beast. "Alright you oversized pigeon, I'm gonna guess you're the one attacking people around here. So that means I get to take you down." He grinned at the prospect of taking the bird down a notch. Pulling his eye patch off, Naruto revealed his shadowy eye. As he pushed some of his chakra into the shadow-filled socket, it began to glow ominously in the shadow-filled forest canopy. Feeling the dark energy flow through his body once more, he brought his hands out and activated one of his newest techniques. Binton. Dark Containment Barrier. At his command, dozens of shadows shot out from their surroundings to cover the two in a large shadowy dome. Blocking out all light, the bird let out cries of distress as it attempted to escape the dome. It crashed into the walls of the barrier itself to no effect before it flew away slamming into trees. Created with his team's strengths in mind, it was a useful barrier to restrict movement. Just enough light and shadows to give Shikamaru plenty to work with while allowing Shino's insects to easily swarm any opponent trapped within. Hinata was just as apt within the barrier, her Byakugan allowing side and her lithe form a stealthy assault that would badger any foe into defeat. Truly a useful jutsu to contain the battle to a smaller area, just what he needed against agile foes like this beast. The thickness of the shadows only allowed the barest of light to shine through, though with his shadow eye, it may as well as be broad daylight for him. His opponent had sharp eyes as well, so it may not have been as disadvantaged as possible. Nevertheless, his opponent was not able to move around as much now, so he still had a decent advantage. His foe flapped its wings in a powerful gust, flying around the barrier at breakneck speeds. Naruto watched in awe as the bird's wings sliced through tree trunks and branches like a scythe through wheat. How is it doing that? Slicing the top off a tree, the bird landed on its new perch and switched its gaze onto the genin. Understanding that his opponent was facing him now instead of escaping, Naruto readied himself to fight the enraged animal. He reached into his pouch's shadow and grabbed a kunai in one hand, a fistful of shuriken in his other. Setting his feet to have a better position in case he needed to dodge, Naruto waited for his avian opponent to make their move. He didn't need to wait long, as with a narrowing of its predatory gaze and loud screech, the large falcon burst forward with shocking speed. Better prepared for its fleet movements, Naruto waited until his opponent was mere feet away before he fell backward on his branch. Using chakra to keep his feet connected, he spun around the branch as if he were on a fulcrum, allowing the bird to fly harmlessly overhead. Deftly swinging himself back up, he jumped behind the bird of prey. A quick swipe of his kunai, and he managed to get a thin cut along the back of the avian's torso, causing it to let out a pained shriek. It quickly flapped its wings and turned back to him once more, this time aiming for his branch instead of his body. Throwing his shuriken as a distraction, Naruto was surprised to see the metal blades bounce harmlessly off the feathers of his opponent's front. Even the two that hit the front of its wings simply bounced off as if they were paper toys, almost as if the bird had hardened its body to iron-like density. So surprised was the Uzumaki that he failed to react in time as the bird swooped in to send him and his perch crashing to the ground. Managing to turn his flailing foal into a passable tumble, the boy rolled a few times and eventually made it back to his feet. He once more jumped into the trees, using his kunai to slash at the bird's wing in an attempt at ending the fight. only to widen his eyes once more as his blade screeched against a wing as if it were steel itself, getting disarmed and once more being knocked for a loop. Landing in the branches of another tree, Naruto steadied himself and shook out his hand to rid it of the numbing pain. Okay. What the hell is going on? He cried out in surprise, is this stupid thing using chakra? What is it, a summon? He could faintly feel the bird reinforcing its feathers and light body with the life energy, somehow gaining immense defense despite its natural fragility. Not summon, chakra mutation. Eyes widening at the shadows whispered theories, Naruto could only gape as he dodged out of the way of another divabomb from his feathered foe. Of course, he would face an animal chakra mutation, it was just his luck. Chakra mutations were a somewhat recent occurrence in the shinobi world. The result of animals procreating in an area of large shinobi-based conflict, the kind that left lasting chakra impressions on the land from hard-fought battles. If memory served, this far south was near one of the old Senju Uchiha battlegrounds from back in the warring clans era. That would have certainly left behind potent residual chakra on the land, but there would have definitely been more chakra mutations if the left behind chakra was this strong. Thoughts to reflect on later, as he needed to dodge those deadly talons once more. This time jumping straight up, he vaulted over the angry bird. Focusing his energy to his left arm, he willed the shadow from his cloak to fly from his forearm and latch onto the creature as it passed below him. It let out a surprised squawk as the shadowy lasso wrapped around its throat. The creature was forced to fly in place lest it snap its own neck from the force of its ascent. Naruto took advantage of his hovering opponent and pulled hard, propelling himself toward his opponent. Landing on the bird's back, he was quietly amazed that it was fully capable of maintaining flight with him on top of it. Even as he unleashed a multitude of blows onto the oversized falcon's head and back, it maintained its flight. However, it soon became dazed by the powerful blows and could no longer put enough focus into its movements to maintain altitude. Diving down, it quickly flew into a spiral to try and throw the genin off its back. Gritting his teeth as the centrifugal force tried to throw him loose, he crouched lower to maintain his balance. Seeing the ground coming up at blistering speeds, the falcon immediately pulled up. The whiplash from the sudden move nearly threw the boy off, only the strength of his grip on the feathers and his shadowy tether kept him attached. His feet dangling dangerously over the side of the beast, Naruto was getting tired as he held on for dear life. He needed to get the stupid thing onto the ground, he'd be able to finish it then. But the problem was, how in Kami's name was he going to do it? His silent prayers were answered in the form of a multitude of growls and howls. From all around him his shadow wolves suddenly burst from the forest canopy. A burning rage in their collective eyes at this beast's unyielding defiance of their lord, they pounced with reckless abandon. Two wolves flew from the sides, narrowly missing the bird, but forcing it to change its direction and slow down. The two landed down below on the forest floor, soon chasing after the distraught chakra mutated beast. Naruto heard movement from above and quickly readied himself for his last shadow beast's attack. He waited only a few seconds before his final shadow wolf flew down from above, his fangs latching onto the falcon's right wing like a vice. Though its grip only lasted for a second before the falcon's reinforcement technique tore straight through the wolf's head. It was long enough, with the sudden added weight throwing the bird of prey into a deadly tailspin. Getting thrown from his opponent, Naruto let out a cry of surprise, even as his other two shadow beasts caught him before he could impact the ground. The same could not be said for his opponent, who collided into the harsh environment with a disturbing crunch. Thanks, boys. That was getting tiresome. Giving his minions his gratitude, Naruto regained his footing and quickly made his way to his fallen foe. The oversized mutation had collided bodily with a fallen tree, shearing through it to slam into the large boulder behind it. Despite the impact, he could see it still in decent enough fighting shape though heavily concussed from the landing. Deciding enough was enough, Naruto called one of his beasts to his side. Vanishing to form a smoky vapor around his arm, Naruto dashed forward and slammed his darkened fist as hard as he could into the bird's chest. Inton. Shadow Beast Blast. With a mighty cry, he propelled his beast into his opponent's body. The disturbing squelching was music to his ears as his beast burrowed in his foe's chest cavity. The bird let out a pained screech as its reinforcement technique failed to protect it, a bulbous mass rippling its way through its torso. A few moments later and his shadow wolf once more solidified itself, ripping its way out of the falcon in a gratuitous shower of blood and gore. Naruto panted as he stood outside the splash zone of his attack, watching as his wolf once more assumed its vapor liquid state to remove the viscera from its body and return to his side. Letting out a tired chuckle, the genin happily patted the wolf's head in reward. That was way harder than it should have been, but we won in the end. Good job guys. His soldiers clearly appreciated his praise, their tails wagging as if they were gleeful puppies. Turning to the heavily damaged corpse of his opponent, Naruto was ecstatic to see the telltale black mist and blue energy already wafting from the remains. Letting out a victorious laugh, he grinned madly as his eye glowed brightly in his darkened battleground. Throwing his hand out towards the corpse, he let out a single command. Arise. The shadows surrounding the bird's corpse darkened considerably, covering it as loud screaming and screeches could be heard from unknown locations around him. He let loose a delighted smirk as the shadowy form of his newest soldier burst from the congealed shadows. Landing from its impromptu flight, the massive bird stood before its lord with head bowed in deference. Though prideful in life, it could only feel true ecstasy at being called back from the abyss to serve the shinobi before it. Standing at just over 6 feet tall from head to deadly talon, the falcon had grown in size just as the wolves had done before. Black smoke streamed from its form, a large crossing X on its chest leaking blue energy around it. Its eye glowed the same bright blue as the others, its gaze focused solely on its new master. Whistles, damn, you are huge. Looks like we got a new comrade today, eh guys? As beasts all let out howls and cries of exuberance at their lord's declaration, each feeling true happiness at his joy. Gazing appreciatively at the bird's form, Naruto nodded in satisfaction at the hard-fought spoils of this battle. Alright guys, time to get back to the others. Bows of respect and quiet noises were his response as the shadow wolves once more dived in his shadow for future use. The large bird was left in front of the boy, waiting but a moment before it too transformed into a formless mist and sank into the boy's shadow. Grinning at his latest conquest, Naruto ended his shadow barrier jutsu to once more enter the light of day. Pulling his eye patch back into place, he gazed about the battlefield in the daylight to assess the damages done. Numerous trees were felled by the bird, the branches sheared clean through a great amount, leaving odd-looking bald spots in the treetops. Spotting the heavily damaged remains in the daylight, Naruto let out a distasteful sneer at the results of his jutsu. Definitely don't want to be anywhere near someone when I use that one, practically a shower of blood all over the place. Indeed, it looked like the scene out of a horror movie, the bird's chest and throat was torn apart from the inside out. It would have caused a great many to turn green in disgust at the brutality, though a shinobi would only see the results of a successful use of a deadly technique. Holy hell, Naruto, what the hell did that thing do to you? Looks like something left over after an Akimichi Thanksgiving. A rather shocked voice sounded out behind the boy. Turning to greet his surprised teammate, Naruto nervously scratched the side of his head with a slight chuckle. Yeah, you wouldn't believe me if I told you how tough this thing was. Looking at this place, I highly doubt that. Chakra mutations are notoriously stronger than their mundane counterparts, no doubt Naruto-san had to use excessive force for good reason. The monotone and analytical voice of their Aburam teammate sounded out from above the two. Both turned to see the bespectacled genin standing above them while inspecting one of the trees torn apart by the falcon's attacks. Oh yeah, this was one tough bastard. He ignored kunai and shuriken like they were plushies, had to bust out the big guns to break through his defenses. Naruto nodded to himself, idly stretching out his arms. Is that so? Well, tell us about it on the way back. You were taking so long that Kurenai-sensei had us stop a mile back to come check on you. Nodding at the Nara's words, the Uzumaki lead the trio back towards the caravan. Along the way he regaled them with a somewhat edited version of his battle with a mutated beast, all the while hearing the shadows around them congratulate him on his victory. Sometime later the caravan stopped to make camp, now only a day's travel from the next town, a nice mid-sized trade hub called Kaiashi. Reporting his combat to Kurenai upon arrival, the civilian clients were thoroughly impressed with the boy's prowess. Chakra mutated animals were uncommon to see, much less for one to meet a genin capable enough to defeat one by himself. The Jonin had properly praised the boy for his victory over his mutated opponent, though had lightly admonished him for combating an unknown by himself. She was more forgiving since the boy would have not had much of a chance to make it back to the caravan without fighting the beast, having been several miles ahead of the caravan during the fight. Taking the boy's full report, she decided to send a message back to Konoha to inform them of the presence of chakra mutations in the region. No doubt there could be more in the area if this one had grown so large. A subjugation order would likely be put out for one of the Chunin squads to go hunt out the nests. Sometime later they had made camp for the night, the two carriages drawn to the side of the road in a decent-sized clearing. The horses were tied up to the side, allowed some freedom as they snacked on oats and drank from their water troughs. Eyeing the beasts of burden, Naruto idly wondered how useful it would be to have one as a shadow beast. Shadow beasts didn't tire and couldn't die, reforming so long as he had the chakra available. No doubt they were faster than their mundane counterparts as well. Pushing those thoughts for another time, he refocused on his newest acquisition. He needed to test out his newest minion, whom he probably should name eventually. If he could fly on the back of the beast, he would have a massive boost in mobility compared to other shinobi. Such a boon was amazing to have so early in his shinobi career, though he was rather unwilling to show off his beast so early. How about I name you Goo? You were so strong it took a boulder to knock you down, and you could still keep going. He could feel his newest minion radiate happiness at the name, proudly accepting his new moniker. Smiling to himself at the acceptance, Naruto soon turned his thoughts to other less savory things. There was no telling what some of the more unscrupulous higher-ups in the village would do if it was discovered his beasts weren't summons, but the dead brought back to serve him. It left him in a state of paranoia at times, never knowing if someone would figure it out before he was strong enough to deter any undue manipulations. Sighing to himself, he decided to try and relax from these stressful thoughts. Gazing at the fire in the center of the circle of chairs stumps they had used earlier for dinner, he reminisced to himself on his earlier battle with the powerful beast. As Naruto was distracted by his thoughts, he failed to notice a figure approaching him from behind until they were nearly upon him. He almost jumped when a dainty hand lightly brushed his shoulder. Turning around to face the person responsible for his minor heart attack, he spotted Hinata meekly standing behind him. "Ayano, sorry Naruto-kun. Your watch is over, it's my turn for the night." She squeaked out quietly once she had his attention. "Geez, between you and Shino I don't know who is stealthier. Always scaring a year off my life, I'm going to go gray being on this team." He joked good-naturedly, lightly patting the girl on the back as he stood up. He failed to notice the girl's face turn red as a tomato at his touch, her eyes fluttering for a moment as she struggled to not faint in his presence. "Good night then, Hinata-chan. Give me a holler if you need a nap or something, Kami knows Shikamaru ain't waking up until Kurenai kicks him awake in the morning." There was a reason the Nara was the first to take guard duty. Though after Hinata it would be Kurenai finishing up, so unless the girl was remarkably tired, Naruto wouldn't be up again that night. Hi, Naruto-kun. Good night at her quiet farewell, Naruto walked towards the tent the genin shared. Picking a spot on the other side of the sleeping Nara, he grabbed his sleeping bag and quickly went to sleep. Left alone to her own devices, the girl took a few breaths to try and calm herself down. Though she had grown in great strides to be more tolerant of her crush's close proximity, she still had her moments of weakness. Especially when he looked so cool as he walked off, his earlier heroics in defeating the Chakra mutated animal going through her mind. Could I one day be as strong as Naruto-kun, to be able to confidently fight one of those things by myself? The girl's thoughts swirled in her mind as she imagined about just how far she still had to go to walk alongside her crush. Watching the dying embers of the fire, the girl contemplated her future for some time as the dark night continued on. The next morning started bright and early for Team 8, a deft kick and splash of water, easily awaking the hardest of sleepers amongst them. Having a decent breakfast along with the irate grumbles of the Nara, the civilians merrily chatted with their guardians as the sun rose towards its peak of the morning. Once more taking their places at their assigned carriages, they all began their track once more towards their first destination. The excitement of the day before leading them toward looking forward to what the rest of the trip had to offer, they moved on bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. None had realized that just outside the range of Hinata's Byakugan at the perfect angle, did two dark figures watch as they moved on down the road. Hidden in the shadows of the tallest treetops, their gaze flitting between both carriages, they narrowed their eyes on the boy sitting on guard duty on top of the front carriage. "So, he defeated Experiment F3, eh?" one asked quietly. He quietly read the intercepted report from the team in the distance, easily obtained by man of his caliber the night before. Indeed, rather surprising given the base material for it. Implanted with a ninja's chakra network, it should have easily cut through the boy's weapons. The other spoke with detached indifference. Another failure then? Perhaps, nevertheless it's still a step in the right direction. Of course. Should we do something about them? The figure hummed in thought for a moment before shrugging their shoulders in dismissal. It's doubtful they'll be bothersome in the future, but have our associates in Kaiashi keep an eye on them. No need for them to stumble onto things before they're ready, right? Of course, I'll contact them immediately. But that one of the figures vanished from the trees, leaving the other alone in his observations. Watching as the caravan vanished over the horizon, the figure couldn't help but smirk in anticipation. To think, and here I thought this assignment would be too easy, let's see just what you can do, little shade a moment later.